I'll keep that in mind. Thank you. So for tonight's agenda, which will be about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm just going to give you a very brief background around 36 Commuting Solutions since it's been some time since we've come before you. Give you a brief update on the completion of the US 36 EIS, update you on the Tiger grant application, which was submitted on September 15th, and to tell you about a campaign that our organization has started called Help Us Fix US 36, and to see if you could join us in our advocacy efforts for the US 36 corridor. The mission statement of 36 Commuting Solutions is to enhance the mobility of commuters along the US 36 corridor for today and the future. So that embodies everything from advocacy to trying to increase employee mobility services, expand bus service, carpools, bicycling facilities, and the use of those options, teleworking, that sort of thing. We've had a long-standing role in the US 36 advocacy efforts and mobility programs. We work very closely with Mayor Muckle and the other elected officials, mayors along the corridor, to advocate for the US 36 corridor. I also work real closely with Jay Wolfworth on the Superior staff. Members of the coalition include the local governments between Boulder and Westminster, Longmont, and about 50 private sector businesses. Superior's Key Equipment Finance and the chambers are members of our coalition. I'm sure you've heard a lot about the EIS over the years, but I'm happy to say that we're nearing completion of this study that has been going on since 2003. It's funded by RTD and CDOT and is a plan to define the transportation needs through the year 2035. So it's a very significant document and milestone for our quarter to be nearing completion of it. A draft of the EIS was released in 2007 and included two construction packages. One which was to include managed lanes, two buffer barrier separated lanes in each direction, and the other package that included adding a general purpose lane and a hot lane in addition to the bikeway and bus rapid transit components. Based upon stakeholder and community feedback, the intent in the final EIS is to narrow those options because the two packages that were included in the draft cost nearly $2 billion, would have required significant right-of-way acquisitions, both private businesses as well as residents, and it was just too big of a package. So the current final EIS includes a set of multimodal solutions, which has always been the policy direction of this corridor. The plan would add a high-occupancy vehicle, high-occupancy toll lane in each direction, extending the HOT lane where it terminates in Westminster currently all the way to Foothills Parkway in Boulder. It would include bus rapid transit with a side loading station and a corridor-wide bikeway. The EIS also includes replacing outdated pavement. As you know, this highway was built as a 1950s toll road, so the state of the highway is in poor repair in general. And most of the bridges and interchanges need to be replaced, so the study includes replacing all of those. As I mentioned, this is a significant milestone to wrapping up the study this year, most importantly because it poises us finally for state and federal funding. The cost of this vision plan is $1.4 billion. Only $711 million are currently included in the Dr. Cog Regional Transportation Plan through the year 2035, and unfortunately, those funds are currently programmed not to be available until about the year 2021, so about a decade from now. So not only is the full funding not available, it won't be available for many more years. So what we know about our corridor is that it will need to be repaired and replaced and rebuilt in pieces as funding is identified. Through the U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition and work with RTD and CDOT, there is an agreement that the first set of funding options will focus on the mobility of the corridor rather than focusing on interchanges and bridge replacements, that we have existing congestion issues on our corridor that are the agreed upon set of priorities. And the total of this phase one improvements is roughly around $500 million and includes the managed lane in each direction, bus rapid transit, the corridor-wide bikeway, intelligent transportation systems, and TDM are efforts to shift commuter behavior and encourage employees and commuters and residents to use these new enhanced benefits. So that's currently what we're trying to identify funding for, is that first phase of improvement. Currently an opportunity presented itself that could provide partial payment of that first phase through the U.S. DOT's Tiger Grant application. This grant was included in President Obama's Recovery Act. Tiger stands for Transportation Investments Generating Economic Recovery, so clearly they're looking for job creation as a key indicator of providing this funding. Nationally, there's $1.5 billion available, so it's not very much money. in transportation land. Applications were due a week and a half ago, which our coalition worked together with RTD and CDOT to submit. And projects will be selected by January 15th. And as Mayor Muckle alluded to, we heard at the end of last week that there were 1,400 applications submitted from across the nation requesting $57 billion. So the stakes or the odds are quite high in that for us to be getting this funding, but this project was supported by Governor Ritter, our congressional delegation, Mayor Hickenlooper, the U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners Coalition, many businesses, the Colorado Environmental Coalition, the Sierra Club. So we, as a corridor, worked with CDOT and RTD to put on a game for this application. So we really went all out and have worked on it for 4 months. So we're highly hopeful that we will be within the competition for this funding. In the application, we applied for packages of $100 to $200 million. And new to the conversation, CDOT and RTD both are providing a local match funding, which sweetens our pot and offer. It wasn't a requirement to have local funding commitments. So this would give us a step up potentially to leverage any federal funding that we are able to obtain. The RTD Fast Tracks funding is contingent upon winning this grant. The CDOT funds are not. And if we got the 100 or 200 million and matched it with the 60 million from RTD and CDOT, it would extend the HOT lane roughly about 6.8 miles to Brumfield to Wadsworth interchange, or if we got 200 million from the federal government all the way to Interlochen. And it would construct a portion of the US 36 bikeway and part of the bus rapid transit system. This shows a map of where the hot lane currently terminates in Westminster, and if we were to have a $160 million package, how far up the corridor it would get to, and if we had $260 million a little bit further, we would get to the Interlochen interchange there. I just wanted to include a few project benefits that we included in the grant application. That this project would provide or create about 7,200 jobs. That it would provide a 25-minute travel time savings for transit riders and for HOT, HOV users. That it would increase our transit ridership by 26% and carpooling by 5%. So there's a lot of multimodal benefits of this funding. And of course there are environmental benefits of reducing emissions and gas consumption. Citizens, and to demonstrate political support for this application, 36 Commuting Solutions started a grassroots campaign called Help Us Fix US 36, and we really just wanted to call attention to this new funding opportunity and to get citizens and elected officials engaged in this application to demonstrate the support that we have and the need that we have for this funding. And that we need it now if we want to see improvements to our corridor of any magnitude. On our website, we have created avenues for citizens and stakeholders to email congressional members, which is our primary task that we're calling upon people to participate in. We have gotten significant coverage since we started, significant media coverage since we started this program in August. Again, to generate awareness and buzz. We've created tools such as what you have on your desk that simply describe what the problem is with the US 36 corridor and how funding is needed and what it would give and provide and the benefit of that. And we are talking to a lot of different entities, such as I am here tonight. We're meeting with all the city councils and town boards along the corridor and many private sectors businesses as well. This is a quick snapshot of our website where you can see we have all the email addresses for elected officials and draft email copy to make it very easy for citizens and elected officials to advocate for our corridor. This takes a few minutes. Here's some of the press clippings that we've received since we started the program in August. Again, just calling attention to the fact that we are finally at a point where we can be requesting funding, that we are looking at this Tiger Grant as an early action to bring transportation to our corridor, and to talk about our coalition and how long that we've been working on this. So I just wanted to close by asking you all if you would contact your congressional members by using our website tool or using your own resources to let our congressional members know how much we need this funding for our corridor. And of our coalition, and we greatly appreciate it.
Great. Thank you very much. So, questions from the board?
And thank you for having the drafts and everything available. Those are great tools. Anybody's sending out emails. The one question I had is, what is the determining factor between the $100 million or the $200 million grant? How do you apply for both of those? Is that correct? Or
Yes, in our application, the maximum amount any state can receive in total is $300 million. And a few of the elected officials from the Mayors and the Commissioners Coalition went to Washington, D.C. a couple months ago to meet with the Undersecretary of Transportation, Roy Keenitz, and learned that most likely they would not be providing any one entity a $300 million grant. He highly encouraged us to submit smaller, scalable projects and to define what the benefits of that would be. So that was the reason why we included a couple different choices.
And the other question I had, just because we've been doing with this a lot, and Dr. Cog, is with the cost of the project coming over budget. And so is there any sort of a provision in that with the Tiger funds, or is that something that the communities along 46 would come up with? How is something like that be
Can I
resolved?
ask you to clarify your question? I'm not quite sure.
In other words, so we have estimates of what it's going to cost to fix or to add that the managed lane, and what if the costs come in over what we've estimated?
These are the numbers that CDOT has given us according to their planning staff, determining what they think would be feasible and how far they could get it in today's economy.
But we couldn't go back and ask for more money, so this is it. It would be up to us to come up with it.
Yes.
Okay.
Nothing to do with our changes. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Mr. Bartholomew, obviously a key element in the U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners. It's been a pleasure to work with you for the last few years, and really appreciate all your hard time and work on this. It's really been great. All right. With that, Mr. Randall.
Second of the three items we have on the agenda this evening is a brief discussion on the board's desires regarding neighborhood electric vehicles. There has been some recent state legislation which empowers municipalities to adopt regulations if they're so interested in allowing neighborhood electrical vehicles. This was discussed at length when the town was doing its town center visioning. And there's been other support for the concept of allowing neighborhood electrical vehicles more recently than the town center. So as a result of the enabling state legislation, Kendra's prepared a brief memo for you, and it outlined 4 or 5 critical questions that we need the board to respond to before we can actually draft the enabling ordinance. But I guess first an overriding question would be, is the board still supportive of the concept of allowing, in limited instances, neighborhood electrical vehicles within the community? And then if so, we need answers to these other 5 questions.
I'm still in favor of it, and it's part of sort of something I wanted to raise tonight anyway about making sure we have maybe bike lanes painted on more or all of our streets. So that's another thing I was going to suggest. So to the extent that these could go in those bike lanes, that might be a good spot. If that's not what the plan is, then I guess I'm still in favor of it.
So I think there's a couple issues here. So obviously the electrical assisted bicycles won't be going in the middle of a driveway lane. That would be more on a sidewalk or in a bike lane.
On the bike, yeah. Those are probably more appropriate for bike lane, yes.
And the low-speed electric vehicles, however, could be potentially be in a driveway or
Yes,
a drive lane.
it could be on a regular street.
So there's two different, slightly different issues that probably should be addressed. One was, there's discussion about low-powered scooters.
Yeah, scooters can go up to 40 miles an hour, and I know that as far as I've heard so far, municipalities are all over the book on whether they're allowing these in the roads or not in the roads, or in the bike lanes or not in the bike lanes.
Mm-hmm.
Some feel that they're dangerous in the bike lanes. Some feel that they're dangerous on the roads. So that's why we need some direction. I haven't done sort of an official survey, but from what I've been seeing on my municipal attorney's listserv, that people are going all over the place on this.
And none of these would be anticipated, well, Segway, I'm not sure if that would be, I sort of think of that being on a sidewalk.
Yeah.
And the problem it depends, because segways, what some are doing is putting segways in bike lanes because they're too fast for sidewalks and pedestrian ways. But then the problem is then you have bike paths and trails, and the issue is, do you allow the segways in those as well? They can only go 12.5 miles per hour, which is reasonably slow, but some feel that are still dangerous on pedestrian walkways or sidewalks with pedestrians on there. So.
Lisa?
Well, it seems to me that we'd need a little matrix and then select which place we want to make them legal, and that could help us structure our discussion. And if we had information on sort of at least a count or what the main cities are that do allow it here versus don't allow it there, sort of thing, that would really help support our making an intelligent decision as opposed to just random thoughts, which I hate.
Well, I mean, we do have 5 questions that need to be answered, so I think that we have structured it in that way, and I'm happy to go through those. But if you all want more information about what other municipalities are doing, that's not included in this memo, so that's what I do.
Joe?
I guess I want to step back a notch, because since people are all over the map on what they're doing, and I can see why, is there any way we can get some advice from safety professionals on this? Because I really would like to have that kind of advice. Or if there's articles written or some kind of literature on it, mixing things with bike paths or mixing things, there's consequences each way, and I really would like some.
Well, it's unclear.
The memo indicated that segways, and there is a contradiction in the legislation, but segways are permitted, or municipalities are permitted to regulate them on bike paths, but elsewhere in that same legislation, they're prohibited from bike paths.
But as I said, some of the mountain communities definitely want segways on their bike paths because it's a big tourism attraction for.
I think it'd be kind of exciting to see a Segway go down the chasm.
Maybe not up.
Well, we can certainly ask. I mean, I can ask our sheriff's department if they have input on this. Or
Any research or
Sure.
anything that we could, I really feel in the dark on what makes sense on how to. And the other question I had, my assumption right now is nothing that's not licensed and registered is allowed on the roads, except that's motorized, and nothing that's motorized is allowed on the sidewalks and paths. That's my simplistic understanding of our town rules right now.
And this would certainly change it.
This would change that, yes.
Golf
Because
carts would be an example of a motorized vehicle that would be allowed on limited roadways. Roadways with posted speed limits of under 35 miles an hour or under.
And in direct relation to what you're saying, if you chose to allow electrical assisted bicycles on your bike paths, those can go up to 20 miles per hour. So that removes that distinction from motorized versus non-motorized on your bike paths.
Trustee D'Souza. Yes.
So if we did nothing, and what are the guidelines? And if we don't do anything that prohibits or we don't do anything that allows, does it just follow the state guidelines as far as that, or do we need to actually take a stand on it one way or the other?
You do need to take a stand because right now none of them would be allowed. So, for example, low-speed electric vehicles would not be allowed on your roadways right now.
Anywhere, okay.
Because you haven't specifically allowed them. And there is some concern. I know that there was an article, I believe it was in the Times?
Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal, excuse me, about the problem we have is low-speed electric vehicles do not have to meet safety test requirements, crash test requirements, or as stringent crash test requirements, excuse me. So some are very concerned about allowing them on roadways even at 40 miles per hour, because injuries can be bad even in a regular car at 40 miles per hour. So perhaps we do need some more guidance. But the result of the article was it's a hodgepodge. Some are allowing them and some aren't. So.
Other questions or comments?
I'd really like to move forward with it, but I do feel like the suggestions made are important.
We'll pull together the additional information, both what other municipalities are doing, a matrix of, and maybe some suggestions based on what others are doing in terms of, you've got 5 different class of vehicles, if you will, or classes of transports, and how best to deal with it. On-road, off-road, permitted, not permitted, golf carts and 14-year-olds.
Right.
All kinds of potential.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think we have a little bit of time to think about this, and I think that safety is, we want to be energy conscious, but safety is paramount.
Is there anybody other than Boulder County Sheriff that you'd like us to, in terms of safety experts?
I'm not sure. That's
I don't know if there's an
whether maybe
association.
even Alex might be aware of something in his world that's been published on.
Or if you come across one of the cities that you're talking to and they've done a study.
Or advocacy group, or whatever. I'm sure there's plenty of those around.
I think there are plenty of
I suspect.
advocates.
I suspect that there are.
You had some in attendance.
Segway advocacy group, right.
You had some in attendance at some of your meetings.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Third one had to do with, and it was a status report update on the enhanced communications plan. I believe it was late in July that the board first saw it in June and then endorsed it in late July, the 9 organizational actions. And I just wanted to give the board a status report on where we're at. Not all of them have been accomplished. There's been progress made on most, if not all. But be glad to, without going through and reading it, be glad to answer any questions that you may have had on the stuff that we've done to date, as well as those that are in progress.
Why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, why don't you give a highlight, in case there are people that are watching that would be interested in this, can you give a 2-minute synopsis of the highlights?
Certainly. Probably the most significant was the improvements and expansion of content on the town's website. We have asked 4 individuals who have agreed to serve on a task force to study and make recommendations on content and format. Unfortunately, we've not been able to get that group together since arranging it first part of August. A significant addition of content has been made to the website. Most notably, the finance department has loaded on a lot of very useful information, some of which has been staff-driven, some of which was board-driven, and candidly, some of which was citizen-driven. The financial reports, both monthly reports, the accounts payable, salary information, and the like. The fact that we're now broadcasting and web streaming our workshop sessions was a result of a Deus comment. And frequent ads, and trying to update it on almost a daily basis to make sure that all the dated material are off. And just as a segue, we had a resident call today asking on how they could get an application for the Citizens Academy, because the deadline was a week ago Friday. It had been removed because we wanted to get the dated materials off, but we were able to get the information to the individual that had requested it. The e-newsletter, which we've talked about on a couple of occasions, we've made great strides. We have more than 1,500 people that have made subscription, and by subscription we're saying have given us their email addresses so that they are in a position to receive it when we're prepared to go electronically. As I included in here, our suggestion, recommendation is that we do a dual issue in the month of December and then go officially electronic, completely electronic come the month of January. And that's also included in the budget proposal that's been before the board and is currently under review and discussion. The blogs have been created. The staff has done, I thought, a very admirable job, more than 20 posts. The board and I have done less admirable. We've done some, but we have some followers. What I found somewhat disheartening, at least personally, is that there have been little engagement as a result of those postings. I don't know that there's been any comment or response, at least through the blog itself, for either the board, the staff, or the manager's blog sites. But a lot of good information is getting out there, and it is, at least from my perspective, easily attainable through the website. Citizens Academy starts a week from tomorrow night. We've had a handful more applicants. We are going to proceed with the 6-week session. Again, weekly Tuesday evening sessions starting at 7 o'clock, and the first session is a week from tomorrow on October 6th. And it's an in-depth review. I had somebody refer to it as very similar to the candidate orientation that the staff held a little over a year ago, the last time we had a municipal election. This is going to be 12 hours of intense with leaders from within the organization providing information on each of the specific sites. Very excited about that, looking forward to seeing what kind of reaction we get from those people that invest the time to go through it. A couple of things that we just have not gotten off the ground yet. We haven't had an executive session since that period of time for the board to review executive session minutes, but we will do that when we have future executive sessions, that there's a period of time that the board will, that we've retained the records, that the board will review it, and if there's an opportunity to release any of that information, we will. But that's a product of having sessions in order to decide if it can be released. And the last one, and probably the most significant for tonight's discussion, was what the board had asked, and it was one of the suggestions that we develop a protocol for responding to citizen inquiries that get raised at public meetings. This is based on some staff discussion and some things I've been able to find from other communities on how they go about closing that loop. So there, I believe there's 9 points here, this was our collective suggestion on how we go about doing it. And the suggestion would also go that if the board endorses this, we would actually add it to the agenda template, so that anybody reading the agenda who wants to come up to the dais understands what the rules or the expectations are. They may not get an answer right at that point. The mayor will make the decision on whether an answer is going to come, whether it's going to come immediately or thereafter. If it's going to come thereafter, it will be brought back to the board for discussion at a public session.
Great. Questions or comments from the board? Lisa?
So on number 3, the e-newsletter,
Yes.
my recollection is we also said that for those people who weren't e-available, we might allow them to opt into a print version, and I didn't see that mentioned here. So that might be a good thing for us to make sure.
And it was still our intent to go from our production of approximately 4,500 print newsletters to a quantity of somewhere in the 100 to 200 in anticipation. And for budgeting purposes, we've included an allowance to continue a print version for people who specifically say, I want to continue to get my hard copy.
And is it cheaper than at that point just to do a black and white, sort of print of a PDF, or would you do the whole print thing?
Whether we
Yeah.
do 4-color.
Yeah, so I'm not sure it needs to be as elaborate then.
Exactly.
That's all I'm thinking. And then on the last one that you mentioned, the periodic review, the establishment protocol.
Yes.
There's only one of these that's looped back. There's a whole bunch of bullets, but there's only one that loops back, and that was, I think, one of the main points of how do we loop back, and we got about 9 bullets here, and only one is looping back. I would suggest that we do 2 things for looping back. One is, it says if a response is to be made at a later time, the respondent shall bring the matter back to the town board for closure, and that makes some sense, although I'm worried about long lists or elaborate solutions or whatever. But I think that the other thing is that we should maybe have a running tab on some of those on the website. And that would be whatever was going to be said or whatever did get said or whatever as the solution, that also be posted on the website. Just so if the person doesn't happen to come this week or whatever, they're still able to look at what they're answering. It's a suggestion.
Yeah.
I like that idea, actually.
My only thoughts about that is that it would be part of the minutes anyway, so which can be accessed on the website. So I assume that would be, if we came back with something that would just be printed in the minutes that could be
If they get
accessed.
Then we've got to make sure we just say answer. We don't just say answers are given to these questions, but rather we have to write the
Some,
answers.
right.
So.
Okay. Other thoughts? Well, my thoughts are a couple. I think the looping back will be helpful. It gets us out of trying to come up with an answer that might not be accurate during the meeting, and so at least we can have accurate information, and then bringing it back to the town board, I think, would be very helpful, and then everybody will have that information as opposed to just getting back to somebody offline. And I think the review of the executive session minutes is a fantastic idea and long overdue. And once again, I think thank you very much for that suggestion, because I think it'll be fantastic.
The other one, and I meant to mention it, I've been having difficulty getting a hold of the Monarch High School principal in order to make arrangements for Student Government Day. I talked to one of the civics teachers who was extremely excited, but I didn't want to be going directly to one of the instructors without getting the buy-in from the top. So I've been trying, on more than a dozen occasions to call Dr. Anderson at Monarch High, and I've just not gotten through to her. But I'm confident that we're going to be able to pull that off. And that was intended to be a late spring event, probably a March or April. There'll be a lot of activity leading up to it as kids find out what the roles are, what their expectations are, and learning more about what local government does. And then they'll be applying, if you will, for specific positions to serve as mayor, as a board trustee, as a public works director, as the town clerk, so that they can shadow them for the full day. We haven't lost sight of that one. We're working hard on it.
That'd be a great one. I know that they are doing in their government class right now current topics of issues going on in Superior. So, in fact, my son asked me last meeting, what's one of the big topics that are going on? And I said, well, we're talking about marijuana tonight. I don't know if I can bring that into school. So they're always looking for ideas. So.
Very good. Other questions or comments? Well, this is a great product, so thank you very much. So why don't we move on then?
For your next agenda for the first meeting in October, and Joe, you said you will not be in attendance at that meeting? Okay. C will probably not be ready with, which was we were anticipating having the first reading of an ordinance regarding neighborhood electrical vehicles, but we'll bring that back for subsequent discussion at a future workshop session. Agenda item D, the second reading of an ordinance that's being presented to you for first reading tonight, and that has to do with regulating the use of communication devices while driving. It mirrors the state statute. It would ban the use of cell phones by drivers under the age of 18. It will ban texting for all. And the reason that we're recommending that we adopt it in our municipal code is so that when Boulder County Sheriff does enforce it on our streets, nobody will ever violate it in Superior. But if somebody passing through were to be violating the ordinance and stopped for it, it would be written as a municipal offense rather than as a state offense. Second reading and final consideration of a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, which was a recommendation made by Mr. Kuffner pertaining to maximum lot coverage in RL and RM zoning districts. This was referred to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended this aspect. There were actually two recommendations or requests. They unanimously recommended this one, first reading tonight, second reading, public hearing, and final reading in 2 weeks. And then the board, assuming we complete the review of the proposed FY 2010 budget tomorrow night, it is anticipated that the board will be presented with the first reading of the necessary ordinance at the next meeting. We anticipate a public hearing and formal adoption of the budget at the second meeting in October, and then there will be a number of other resolutions which are traditionally approved in concert with the budget. Tax levies, a fee schedule, which we took out of the Code of Ordinances this year and said that we would annually adopt it. So all of the budget things will be presented for first reading at the next meeting and public hearing and final approval at the second meeting in October. And I would anticipate that any policy questions that have been raised by the Finance Committee and referred to the entire board will be the basis of your workshop session next meeting. I think as a result of the first review that we had, there was one policy issue that got raised that had to do with Tier 3 streets, and all the others were questions about specific comments or elements of the budget that will be addressed tomorrow. But any of the policy issues that rise to the interest of the full board would be coming back as your next workshop session.
Questions about this? I have one, and I guess we'll talk about it later on as well, but would the texting and or use of a cell phone by someone under 18, is that a primary offense that someone could be stopped for? Or is that a secondary offense that could be ticketed after the fact?
It's a primary offense that someone can be stopped for, but an officer needs to see it. So in other words, I can't report, hey, I saw Scott driving down the road texting, and then have an officer write a ticket. The officer actually needs to observe it.
Okay. All right.
So it is a primary, unlike a seatbelt.
Okay. Thanks. Other questions? All right. Weekly Digest.
A couple of items from the Digest. A reminder that the Finance Committee is scheduled to meet tomorrow night to continue its review of the proposed 2010 budget. We'll begin at 6 o'clock in this room. A couple of items of development. I'm going back over a couple of these Weekly Digest since I was not at your last meeting. We have received the new application by Remington Homes for the proposed residential development, annexation residential development on the Oxner property. That is currently being reviewed by staff and external parties, including Urban Drainage and all of the Boulder County and all of the other agencies that we send these applications to. It is anticipated that these will be presented to the Planning Commission either in late October or early November, and they know they're behind the gun. Our original agreement, when we entered into the option to purchase some open space property from Mr. Oxner, has a sunset. I believe it's December 12th or December 15th, and they know they've really missed the target dates by submitting this application so late. But it is in. We have had a meeting in the last week with Guardian Storage, and they expect to be submitting their final development plans within the next week. We have received necessary applications for the placement of the home that has been in transit for many, many months at 2nd and Maple. The Bennetts are proceeding with the placement of that home on the property that they own, which fronts on Maple. Some information on financials. Again, the board has seen this, but for the benefit of those, for others that might be of interest, sales tax receipts for the month of July were down a whopping $2,300 from the prior year, which represents 0.3%. It was actually our best month since February. We are still trending about 2% below last year, and while that equates to about $160,000 for the town, it's a far better financial position than any other municipality I'm aware of within the metro region. Vehicle use tax was down significantly, almost 33%. We were surprised because this was the period with which the federal government was running its cash for clunkers, and we thought there'd be a lot of activity. There might still be some in the pipeline, but we were disappointed by the month of September's receipts for vehicle use tax. And building permits, while they're making a modest rebound, earlier in the year we were down over 80%. We're still down 62% for the year. That's an indicator of both use tax and modest building permit revenue, because we share our building permit revenue with our building commission, third-party building review staff. It's not a big economic hit, but it talks about level of investment within the community. So the fact that building permits are down has more of a spin-off of activity than it does a direct financial hit on the town. That's all I have. Glad to answer any questions.
Trustee Skumatz.
Let's see, I had some answer. You asked a follow-up question about other than 1A, and I guess if you're looking for feedback on that, I was interested in going beyond just 1A.
I've received offline comment from two board members, and the comment was yes to the tax issues, no opinion on the term limits for the district attorney. If you're comfortable with.
I'm the same.
Okay.
If those are taxing, I didn't know the climate.
Tax and
bonds.
bond. Yeah. Climate smart bonds.
Yes.
Bonds so that the county can make issue debt for their own energy conservation improvements, and then the extension of the open space sales tax were the three initiatives.
Then my other comment was asking how big these were going to be. Because I think the one that we have on the field near Safeway is too large. But I know this is meant to be
thought the
to name a
dimensions
whole
were in
park,
there.
so I wasn't sure how big those were planned to be. I couldn't really tell from anywhere in here. So if you could let
Community
me know.
park, 72 inches wide, 45 inches
Oops.
high.
What was that?
72 inches wide, 45 inches high. Town 9, 54 inches wide, 34 inches high. I couldn't tell you whether that's comparable, bigger or smaller than the one you're referring to at the entrance to Community Park, the one that sits at the Lastoka, the Colton Road trailhead.
So
Is that about the size of the Woodstock one? You don't know that?
Maybe.
I don't know.
That's a big one.
It'd be nice to know
Yeah,
if this is
pretty big.
comparable or not comparable.
I'll find a
we
comparable
have a-
one. I'll find a
yeah.
comparable one for each and be able to at least say.
Yeah, I mean, partly just to say, should we have some sort of policy for roughly how big these things
Yeah.
are? That's what I'm sort of headed toward there. So, anyway, okay.
Actually, ProStack did come up with a sign policy.
Oh,
I don't recall whether the board saw it, endorsed it, but when they came up with the whole signage plan,
Yeah.
they came up with standards.
Right.
Policy may have been the wrong word. Standards for the signs that they wanted to see installed. But I'll find comparables for the two that are being proposed for Town 9 and Community.
and what the ones are that we have in town. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Anything else off the digest?
No.
Any other questions? Yeah.
The work action.
Yeah.
May I ask the town manager, he said 33% for the cars are down. 30%, excuse me, 33% of what? What is the figure there? I have no idea. You might all know how much that's down money-wise. And also the 62%, what is the money-wise that we're down in the percentage? I got no figures for it.
So I don't have them on me, so I don't know if the
Again, sales tax at 2% equates to about $160,000
We're down.
in sales tax. Vehicle use tax is expected to be down for the year. While we're down for the month of September by 33%, we're down 14% for the year in vehicles. And we expect that the 14% will stay consistent for the balance of the year, and that'll equate to a roughly $105,000. Building permits is a much smaller number, again, because 70% of everything that comes through the door gets paid to our third-party vendor. So if it doesn't come through the door, we don't pay the vendor. So the net on building permits is small. But it is, again, indicative of the level of activity within the community and has spin-off. If people aren't putting up room additions, they're not buying appliances, they're not decorating, they're not. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Since we have some time, I know there's been some interest about just the timeline of the roundabout, and without going into details of why, what's happening there, just maybe an updated timeline for anybody who might be interested.
I won't steal any of Kurt's thunder since he got thrown into this bailiwick about 90% of the way through. But if you'd like to give a brief status on where we're at, we had a substantial completion date originally of September 15th and full completion by September 30th. The board's been made aware that there have been a couple of delays. I believe we've extended the completion date by approximately 25 days. Kurt, with that.
And once again, without going into excruciating detail, just kind of where we're at and sort of when people can drive around it.
Yeah. Right now, the west side is, for the most part, complete, except for a final 2-inch lift. We will be starting on the east side. There's a meeting to be had tomorrow that's going to talk a little more about some of the design changes that have been taking place in elevations. It's an ongoing topic with the project. As the town manager had said, we have about 25 days we've added to the project. I think that puts us at our final around November 10th to try and finally complete it. It's obviously getting very close, and there's still half of it to go. So tomorrow's meeting, there'll be some more negotiations. We're shooting for mid to end of October.
When people could, so there would be a sort of a punch list date when everything would have to be done, but then
That
there's
would
the
be-
date when people can actually drive around without the
We're hoping
barricades.
for the, if I had up the days, I don't remember the date off the top of my head. The punch list completion date will be November 10th, and then I think it's like 14 days before that is the substantial, so that's when people will be able to drive. So contractually, they're obligated by the end of October. We're pushing everybody hard to get them sooner.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on it?
No, that was good. Thanks. All right. Well, we might as well take a few minute break before the town board meeting starts. Thanks. Trustees for September 28th, 2009. And Phyllis, if you call the roll.
Okay, Mayor Andrew Muckle,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lisa Skumatz.
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli,
Here.
Dana D'Souza,
Here.
Elia Gagoras, Eric Rosenfeld,
Present.
Deborah Williams, Town Manager Scott Randall,
Here.
Town Attorney Kendra Carberry,
Here.
Town Clerk Phil Sire.
Thank you very much. Item number 3, approval of agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Trustee Sorelli, did you have
Is
anything?
this the time to pull something from the...
This would be the time.
You know, just as an aside, I've never managed to understand consent agenda. 8 years on planning commission. Still, I would suggest, I would ask that we pull item F and item E.
F and E to follow the consent agenda.
Or E and F.
Yes, what? Any other changes? I'm going to recommend just moving something. So it's been a suggestion to try something, and so this, I thought, would be the night to try something out. So I'm going to recommend moving item number 7, reports, questions, and issues, after item number 4, presentations, and have the public comment follow that, unless that causes any consternation. Okay? With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with those changes. Motion by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee D'Souza. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 4, presentations, none tonight. Item number, which would be 7, which is reports, questions, and issues. Trustee Sorelli, would you like to start?
The only report I have is that tomorrow I'm going to meet with representatives of DRCOG for a one-on-one to find out what the elusive role of an alternate on DRCOG is, but that's
Great, thanks. Trustee Rosenfeld, anything?
Actually, I don't have anything, but I do have a quick question. This may have been covered at the last meeting that I missed, but have we heard any updates on from Louisville and on the Northeast Loop? There was supposed to be some discussions, and we had an alternate price, and I know we were trying to push that kind of hard, so...
Mr. Randall?
A very brief phone conversation last week where I shared with their city manager that we disagreed with the CDOT design that bisected the Cable Labs building, that we had an alternative design and an alternative cost estimate, as well as accident data history for that particular, that were interested in sharing with them at the next subcommittee meeting. Mm-hmm. And ball was in their court to find a date that the subcommittee could meet. That was it.
Okay.
I just shared that information was available, and that's what we would be bringing to the next meeting.
Okay, we don't have a time frame for the next meeting?
No, we do not. I'd asked him to get us some dates.
Okay. All right.
And I'm meeting with him again tomorrow morning on another matter, so I'll raise it again.
Trustee Skumatz?
I have a lot of little things, sorry, I'll try to keep them short. And they're not in any particular order, just recollection order. One is that I've been to several Chamber of Commerce events lately, and it's been disconcerting to hear that we're losing some businesses to Louisville because their rates for office space and other things are lower. It'd be great if we could talk with our, for instance, Superior Marketplace folks and see if they're offering anything or thinking about softening the rates or something like that, because there are a lot of empty storefronts, and it would be really great to not be losing businesses to neighboring communities because of significantly lower rates. So I think it would be appropriate for us to approach them. So that would be my suggestion. I would really like to see us have bike lanes pretty much on all of the streets here in town, and I don't know if that's something that we could propose that the Transportation or Safety or whatever it's called committee look at, but I think it would be great to have painted bike lanes on our streets, and I don't know what the cost would be, and maybe that's something that committee could take on and look at and see if it's costly or not.
You're talking about all of the side streets, cul-de-sacs, and...
Well, at least the big ones. Yeah.
The biggest issue is on-street parking.
Okay, well, maybe
I mean, TSC can look
see
at
how
it.
hard that is to tackle. That would be great. I also thought I might remind people, and maybe if we just remind people periodically, it would be, we periodically hear about painting that's missing on crosswalks, and and whatnot. And maybe if everybody who's listening could take a look and what paint is missing in their neighborhood and put it on, and do that website thing that we can do supposedly on the town board comment thing, and get an inventory of what needs painting, that would be great. It seems like that's something that we could keep up well. So.
Trustee D'Souza?
Don't we have a spot where there's like, if there's a pothole or something like that on our website already, the pothole, would that be the same
That's what I
area
was
maybe to
suggesting. Thanks.
have people?
So I guess that's what I'm suggesting.
Missing street sign, street light out.
Yeah. So if we could just have sort of a town-wide hit on that, that would be great to know what our inventory of little boo-boos are that we could fix. Let's see. I already mentioned the open space thing. I've been to a whole bunch of different kinds of meetings, and between the Energy Strategies Task Force for the Consortium of Cities, the Finance Committee that we all went to, a Colorado Municipal League meeting, a statewide committee on electronics waste, and RCAB, Resource Conservation Advisory Board for Boulder County. I think the main things that come out of those are that something that's coming forward for Superior to consider, and I'd like to have us maybe have it on our next agenda, is a resolution that asks for support for the new commercial building codes that are being recommended for the county. So I'd like us to have that considered on our agenda at an upcoming meeting, so just wanted to put that in the plate.
Could we have that go to the planning commission first?
That's an interesting suggestion. I guess that seems like an appropriate. But I didn't know if it was physical things or, yeah, that seems appropriate. I see a lot of head nods. Yeah. We should do that. Let's do that.
We've been waiting for the Boulder County Consortium of Cities to finish the work on their
Okay, that's a good idea.
commercial green building code, so we had something to look at and share, but
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And all I'm saying is that's going to be addressed at their next meeting, which is on the 6th or 7th or something like that of the month, and so it should be coming to us immediately thereafter, and there are drafts available that have been circulated to the Green Committee and all that. I've also been to a meeting with the Louisville Library Committee, and the committee just passed some, has been working on bylaws and some other things, and the one thing that I wanted to pass along is that it's an interesting committee, but if what we're looking for is representation in terms of how our money is being spent or what services are being given, this committee has very limited to no power. And so if and when we enter into any agreements in the future, if we want some kind of representation that's stronger, this is probably not the committee. So, okay. I don't know whether options there are, but I'm just telling you that this doesn't have much power.
Which committee?
It's a library board.
It's what we have
It's
a
not-
representative on, right?
Yes. It's the one we were offered, but that's
Okay.
right. I think that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee D'Souza?
So I have some DRCOG information coming up. There's going to be a survey. It's going to be a Front Range travel survey. It's with RTD. It's with the Federal Highway Administration. It's with CDOT and all the metropolitan planning organizations up and down the Front Range. And they'll be calling people throughout all the communities. So just to let people know that if you do get a call on the Front Range travel survey, it's so that they can help with travel forecasts, but also so that they can have an idea of what type of projects they might need to look at in the future and help with planning. So if you get a call on that, it is a legitimate survey working through the government and also our and local DRCOG. The other thing at the DRCOG meeting, there's new procedures for the urban growth boundary, and they are asking, or this is, I guess, a result of the new discussion that they've had, the continuing discussion that they've had over the urban growth boundary, and they're asking, I assume that you were approached if there's any new additions, which Superior really is a little limited that, but anyway, they're trying to get an idea of growth in the DRCOG region. And one interesting thing is that they're looking at having a high-speed train, and this is something that it didn't go through RTD or CDOT or anyone else. They came directly to the Denver regional governments, and it's a high-speed train that would connect, Denver, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Reno, and Salt Lake. And so they've asked Dr. to participate in that. And so that's, if anybody has any comments on whether they think that would be useful or helpful, or they can let me know about that. And the one other big issue that took up most of the meeting was and I like the way they put it here, the board debated at length on how to move forward on incorporating sustainability into MetroVision. And that's where they left it at with that. That's as far as we got, big discussion. And I did have a question, or I guess a comment, if the town manager could comment on this. So a lot of people have been asking me about the sign out front and commenting that it's been too bright. And so I was wondering if you could just comment what you put in your weekly memo to us about what's going on with that.
First, while we have the electricity, we do not have the programming, the telemetry. It's supposed to be finished tomorrow. I'll believe it when I see it. So the first couple of days it was unregulated, and it was just either bright white or bright blue lighting. We have internally discussed both content and hours of operation. And it is expected that dusk to 6 a.m. we're going to go to 20% maximum brightness, but it will be 100% during the day so that you can see it in sunlight. We're also coming up with rules or procedures for content on how somebody can get something on there. It's not just a town board that it's only going to be advertising town activities, but the intent here was the HOA and the schools and all of the rest, and that there may just be at times time and temperature as well. And then we expect it'll go dark completely. I believe it might be even midnight to 6 a.m.
Okay.
So the dusk would change, obviously, based on the time of the year.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was all.
Great, thanks. I guess the only thing I need to mention is that we had a nice meeting with the county commissioners. It's always nice to get together with them. There weren't really any hot-button issues. We talked about library, countywide libraries or larger library districts. They were open to that, but had some concerns about how it might be implemented. And we talked about their 4 issues, which now I'm going to not come up with them, but it's the extension of the countywide open space sales tax, the extension or the rebonding for the climate smart renewable energy. On their ballot is also term limit extension for the district attorney, right? And the 4th one I don't remember.
They're looking to issue up to $6 million in bonds for the purpose of making energy conservation improvements to their own facilities.
Okay. And then we talked about urban renewal and various issues that we share interests in. So, but once again, I appreciated the commissioners coming to the town, and it's always been a very helpful meeting. So that's all I had, Mr. Randall.
It had been raised before that the Boulder County Consortium of Cities has asked the city managers to get together to talk about the prospect of shared services. I shared at one of our last meetings that the managers of Lafayette, Louisville, and Superior had gotten together as a precursor to that larger group to talk about ways that the 3 of us could conceivably share. And there are a number of things that are currently in the works as a result of that dialogue. But the larger Boulder County-wide group, Boulder and Broomfield counties, wide group is scheduled to meet on Wednesday morning. And I'll report back on anything that comes out of it.
Right. Ms. Carberry?
I don't have anything. Thanks.
Ms. Harden, anything from you?
The only thing is, the next meeting on the 12th is also Columbus Day, and we changed that, so we will have a meeting on Columbus Day.
On the 12th.
Yes.
Town Hall is not closed on Columbus Day.
Oh, okay.
Great. Thank you. With that, let's move back to what was item number 5, public comment and consent agenda and non-agenda items. Welcome, George.
George Guttner, 109 South Fourth. Thanks, Mayor, for moving item number 7 up there
Sure.
above. Helpful for the people that's here to know what's coming on. I want to speak on E, which is going to come up, and I also want to speak on 9, which will be coming up, so I will address those at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Gladys, 4404 South 3rd Avenue. We will be allowed to comment on number 8 and 9 at the time that they are discussed. Okay. And what about commenting on 6E and 6F. Will that be at the same, when they come up?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. I wanted to know, I understand that the budget's still being worked on, and that it's on the next agenda, I think, the October 12th. I wanted to know a time when I could come to the town hall and look at the budget. Do I need to call, make an appointment? When can I come? What can you tell me?
Obviously, we want to post this online so people can look at it. We'll probably do that after the work session tomorrow, is that
After
right?
the Finance Committee reviews, I don't believe it's on the proposed, I do not believe the proposed budget is on the website. However, a copy is available on the desk in the lobby and has been since the board received it August 3rd.
I wonder if it would make sense, so that makes, that would be good to have a hard copy for it, and whether or not people could access it electronically so they can make comments, whether or not that would be hard to do. I think it would be helpful at least. Phyllis?
It is on the website.
Okay, great.
For
Great.
2010 proposed budget.
Great, thanks.
Okay, and I just want to say thanks to the immediate response to my rant.
Okay. Additional public comment to consent agenda or non-agenda items? With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda, and remaining on the consent agenda is approval of the minutes for the September 14th, 2009 meeting, acceptance of the minutes of the Historical Commission meetings, 8/28 and 9/18, Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Advisory Committee meeting, and Recycling and Conservation Advisory Committee meeting, approval of a liquor license renewal for Costco, and a preliminary reading of an ordinance amending Section 8-1-20 of the Superior Municipal Code to regulate driving while using mobile communication devices. I'll entertain a motion. Trustee Skumatz, second by Trustee D'Souza. Further discussion?
I have a question.
Yes. Trustee
Was-
Cirilli?
Wasn't at the meeting on the 14th,
Okay.
regarding the minutes.
Yeah, we may, I think.
We may want to punt on that tonight.
What's that?
I don't think we have a majority to vote on that, because I was out too. I have to abstain from the 14th.
So we have people abstaining from the minutes who, because they weren't here to approve the minutes. Attorney, how do we proceed with that?
Just put them back on next time.
Okay.
Good idea.
All right. Great. Trustee D'Souza.
I was just wondering if you could read under D. Would it be all right just to read out exactly what that is?
Sure.
So it's not confusing.
So the preliminary reading of the municipal code regulating driving while using mobile communication devices, the state legislature, and I'm just reading from the attorney, thank you, recently approved legislation which prohibits the use of cell phones by drivers under the age of 18 and text messaging by all drivers. These restrictions will take effect in December. So, okay. I don't think we're spending any money, so all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. With that, let's move to what was 6E, a preliminary reading of an ordinance amending Section 16-191 of the Superior Municipal Code. Mr. Rendell.
Very briefly, the ordinance before you for first reading, was a citizen-initiated recommendation, went before the Planning Commission at their meeting in September. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended in favor of it. Staff concurs with the recommendation, and specifically, the proposed amendment to the zoning ordinance would allow for maximum lot coverage in the RL, which is the lowest density residential zoning district, and the RM, which is the modest or medium density residential zoning district, would allow the lot coverage to increase from 30% to 40%.
Okay. Trustee Cirilli, I think this was from you.
Yeah, I pulled this just to understand the real impact of the change, frankly, and perhaps, as I'm just looking for confirmation that in realistic terms, this would not or should not impact planned developments that come before and we approve
Planned developments don't have
Yeah. So this-
previously established standards.
So in all reality, this pretty much impacts original town just about solely that I'm aware of.
There are other areas that are zoned RM and RL, but candidly, generally, when they have come forward, they've come forward as planned developments. It could conceivably impact other areas, but realistically and immediately, it will probably affect original town first.
That was my only question. I just wanted to have that understanding.
And are you anticipating other projects coming forward as straight zoning, or is everything else being PD?
It's hypothetical, but certainly the applicants for the Oxner-Remington could have come in and requested conventional zoning if they had so chosen. They're pursuing the PD route as their option, but nothing would preclude a future annexation or even an existing parcel within town. And we use the underlying zoning districts as benchmarks when we review the requests.
Yes, I understand that.
But I didn't want to say that it will never or could never affect any other parcel outside of original town. That's a little broad.
Trustee Skumatz?
So is this, because it's sort of town-wide, it's not something where we had to notify people within 500 feet or 500 yards or 500 feet, whatever it is, or notify
It's a zoning
people?
text amendment.
And is it something where it affects people broadly, and do we notify people about that, or?
Planning Commission held a public hearing. The board will conduct a public hearing at its next meeting
Terrific.
before it gets adopted.
Thank you.
But no direct notification to any particular property.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions from the board about this? Trustee D'Souza?
And this was just the request came forward just as one resident's request, is that? And Chapter 16 is the chapter that the Planning Commission is currently reviewing, correct? So they're completely involved in this, and they recommended, or they voted in favor of this.
Yes.
Do you know, has this been brought up before, other than by that resident, or was it particularly?
I've heard the request raised, or the suggestion raised, in my 2.5 years with the town. I don't know necessarily where the genesis of that was. It wasn't the first time I'd heard about it when we got this letter.
All right, thanks.
Additional questions from the board? Comments?
Well, it's 4404 South Third. I just have a question. Does this then now match the building code? This 5 foot?
I don't quite understand the question, sorry.
Well, there's, in the building code, isn't there a footage from the property line?
And that's not in the building code. That would be in the land use code.
That's what we're amending.
We're amending the land use code, Chapter 16.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with the building code in any way?
I can't see
No.
any way that would be affected, no.
Okay.
Okay, additional comments?
I don't know if this is where they asked us to George Cup for 109 South 4. I also asked for a side setback change from 10 feet on each lot, which the lots are 50 feet wide. 10 feet takes on each side would be 20 feet, which is allowable buildable spaces. 30 feet for a unit, and 30 feet is not very wide for a unit. So that's why I'm asking for a setback change. If you don't see eye to eye with the 5-foot setback, I would at least like 5 foot, make it 7.5 in between, so it don't look like an army barrack. It would be 35-foot buildings that you could put on your 50-foot lot then, okay? If a person owns 3 lots, you're taking 60 feet out of their setbacks, just for your setbacks that you can't build on, out of 3 lots. And that's why I'm asking. I'm a person that does have more than 1 lot together. The Planning Commission member that didn't agree with this just happened to build across his lot. He had an extra lot at his house, and he crossed his setback because there's an ordinance saying that you can cross on 1 lot to the second lot in the original town of Superior. So I figured that 5 foot or 10 feet building would not look like an army barracks if we wanted to put something on our lot. That's why I've asked this request. And I put the request in at the same time I put the other request in, which you've already discussed. So maybe we'll have to discuss this a little more or whatever.
Okay.
But that's what the city town manager knows about this. I requested this when the land use code started 2 years ago. 2 years ago. This request, and said it'll be taken care of when we do the land use code book. So this is why it's coming up after 2 years.
Okay. Actually, I have a question for the attorney. So, how does this affect buildings that would cross multiple lots? Is it additive or is it
No. Property owner that owns 2 lots, and the example of the property we talked about earlier this evening, where the property owner is placing the modular home that's been in transit for quite some time, is placing it on their existing lots. They own 2 of them, and they're putting the building straddling the 2 lot lines. They're required to have a 10-foot setback. Now it's a 10-foot setback on the 2 side yards, as if the lot had been turned into one lot. Right.
Okay.
It's not additive. It doesn't become 20 and 20.
Oh,
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about the coverage, excuse me.
Yeah, no,
I
sorry.
was trying to envision how you'd break up the building in the middle to get
What, 20 feet in between?
And that's an anomaly. I've got to tell you, I've never seen a land use code which allows a building to straddle a property line, but the town's does.
For historical reasons. Okay, so this is coming back at the next meeting for
Yep.
further discussion and
Public hearing and second reading, correct?
Okay, so you need a
Yes.
Yes.
Gladys, was she? But that's interesting that you're going to let the house straddle the property lines, because when Teddy Chavez went to buy a new modular home, he was not allowed to do that a
Okay.
couple of years ago. 3 years ago, whenever it was. So now why is it all of a sudden okay?
We will be able to discuss this at the next meeting. Probably makes the most sense. So I suspect nobody here on the board, including myself, knows that particular issue.
I can't speak to an application, especially one that predates me. I did have a building permit application that came through shortly after my arrival. We did extensive research and found that the town had adopted an ordinance which said, in original town, buildings can straddle property lines.
Okay.
And we've issued building permits since, as a result of that ordinance that a board had previously approved.
Okay. Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the first reading by Trustee Cirilli.
I move that board approve the first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 16-191 of the Superior Municipal Code, maximum lot coverage in RL and RM zoning districts.
Motion by Trustee Cirilli. Is there a second? Trustee Skumatz, discussion. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 6F, motion to approve the change order. Trustee Cirilli, I believe this is for you as well?
Well, simply because of the size of the change order compared to the price of the original contract, I really want to understand it,
Sure.
and that's the easiest way I can explain it.
Yep. Mr. Wren.
And also, as a side question too, do we have a feel that the pricing of the change is equivalent to square footage-wise, the same pricing as the original bid, or not?
The original bid of $240,000 was based on unit prices, per square foot, per yard, per yard of asphalt, per running foot of curb, per square foot of sidewalk, whatever the work element was. We have no doubt that the final prices that are being presented to us for payment are based on work that was actually done at the unit prices as originally bid. What got missed? The fact that, one, we significantly expanded the area, did quick measurements of what we thought needed to be repaired in terms of cracked curb, replacement sidewalk, those kinds of things. It grew, one, as Kurt indicated in his memo, because of the wet spring, some additional deterioration from the time we had originally measured. And then when our contract or our inspector went out to actually spray paint the stuff, they replaced everything that they saw with any deficiency. And we got what we paid for. We ended up getting a lot more concrete, curb, and sidewalk replaced. Some of it was subsurface. Some of it is stuff that came to light after the scarifying came out. We realized that there were some soft spots, so that was actually asphalt. But the vast majority of this was concrete work.
So, is there a relationship to the expansion of the repaving work we did? This increase, is this related at all to that project? Did they do more concrete work because we were doing those roads up there, or was this intended to cover all the roads where work was needed right from the beginning?
I think part of the reason that we have this degree of a change order had to do with the fact that at the 11th hour, when we got great asphalt bids, if you remember, we had an engineer's estimate of $1.6 million for the areas to be done north of Colton, and the bids came in the order of magnitude of about $600,000. We immediately went out and said, what else at these unit prices can we get? And we added all of the residential streets, except for Indiana, south of Colton. We also did a quick survey and said, now that we're going to expand our area and get a jump start in 2010 and 2011, what sidewalk and curbs need to be replaced as well? We probably missed some of the measurements there because of that haste. I have no doubt that what we're paying for and being asked to pay for is what got done. It would have been better had we either taken more time or had anticipated greater quantities at the time. Biggest picture, though, we budgeted $2.9 million. We ended up approving contracts for roughly 1.9 and then another 100 and some odd thousand for the sidewalk. So a little over $200,000 or $2 million for concrete and sidewalk work this year. We added $140,000 contingency, and even with this change order, we're going to end up about $35,000 in the black, better than what we'd expected because of the contingency. The fact that it all falls into this contract. Sidewalk at Town 9 came in almost to the penny, just a couple $1,000s higher. The $1.6 million street resurfacing project actually came in about $10,000 under bid because of actual quantities that got installed. But the total picture, we budgeted, or an estimated $2.26 million, and we're going to come in, again, a good, healthy 5 digits below that, under the 2.26.
Thank you.
Trustee Skumatz?
So I'm concerned, and I hate to raise this for the umpteenth time, but so the bid was based on the scoping work done by RG,
Yep.
and it's 50% off.
Yep.
And isn't that a problem?
Nobody's happy with it.
So we have this, sort of fixed price contract or something, but are we getting any better quality work or any worse quality work or whatever than we used to? We used to get some pretty significant disconnects before, and now we're getting some again, and that seems...
That's a pretty broad brush. But I don't disagree with you. I'm not happy about this either. But there have been a number of projects that we've also had that we've delivered right on and even under. So.
It's just that RG doesn't take on any of the risk. The contractor doesn't take on any of the risk. We take on all the risk, and that's the way this contract has been. Because if the contractor just has to say, we promised this many units because that's what RG said and that's what our contract is. If we instead structure our contracts so the person who was going to do the contracting work had to go out and inspect and actually take on the risk of it, X amount of money and time and materials up to a project max, then we aren't taking on that risk, they are. And I guess I've always been concerned about this unit-based thing because of exactly this kind of an outcome.
Had what you described taken place, we would have paved streets with broken curb. I have no doubt that the curb that was replaced and the sidewalk that was replaced needed to be replaced. The fact that we didn't adequately account for it during the pre-bidding process is the disappointment. I share that with you. But I'm absolutely convinced there wasn't any work that didn't get done or that got done that didn't need to be done.
And that's actually, I don't think that's the same point we're making, so.
I'm not sure the point. If you'd like a contractor to go out and decide what it is he's going to do for us this year.
No. So I would have, you laid out some set of things that was supposed to be done.
Right.
These streets, this many, whatever, feet or, miles or.
Hundreds of
whatever they
feet
are.
of curb
There you go.
and thousands of square feet of sidewalk replacement, correct?
So basically they can bid on it without ever even looking at the spot. They could just say, RG says there are this many linear feet of this and this many linear feet of this, our unit prices are this, and boom, they never would even have to look at the site. And that to me is a problem. We're not getting any second look at it other than RG's look at it. And we get per unit, we get per cubic yard of concrete bid or something like that. And if RG's bid is off, we bear that entire cost. RG bears none of that. They could specify a project as something ridiculously smaller than it is, and we're approving a budget based on this ridiculously smaller amount, and then there's no option other than to continue and pay the higher price. We've approved a certain budget. That's not at all what the project is. RG bears no risk. The contractor bears no risk. We bear all the risk. That's the problem I have.
No. RG's, and I'm not going to sit here and defend RG by any means. RG's risk is with that kind of track record, they may not be in this position when their existing contract comes up.
But that's been.
But the premise that a contractor is going to, the alternative would have been, fine, we're going to proceed with the asphalt work, which was being done by another vendor. That work is going to continue. But the concrete that needed to be replaced wouldn't have been replaced because there was this artificial number, whether it was square feet, $240,000, certain square feet of sidewalk, certain linear feet of curb replacement. The actual condition necessitated that more get done.
And my comment is that contractor, if we specified what street we were talking about, what segments we're having, if they were required to actually inspect the job or something before they make the bid, so that they could say, our guesstimate is that this is actually 20% more cubic yardage than what you're portraying, we would at least have that information and a check on, at least some check on this. Right now, there's no check. And again, we are stuck with paying a higher bill than what we approved.
Higher bill than what we approved,
with no one else responsible.
Well within our budget.
Well, 50% isn't our contingency. 15%, which I've always thought was too high, but anyway, is our contingency.
No. You had a $2 million project.
If it were this project alone,
correct,
we would be 50% over budget.
Correct.
That's
but it isn't. We're not just replacing curb and sidewalk. We're not just asphalting streets. It is a $2 million project.
Well, all I'm saying is this is not the first time by any stretch of the imagination that I've raised this problem with the per unit and the RG estimates and the lack of sharing of the risk.
And maybe just to jump in here, and I remember when I first came on the board, we were having lots of issues with RG over a couple of different projects, and the issue that Trustee Skumas brought up was the exact one. They were putting together, kind of units for the entire project, and when you're approving $1 million project and you're off by 200,000 or whatever or more, that's an issue. When it comes down to this, it would be nice to understand more moving forward exactly what happened here. How much of it was really RG maybe not doing a good job? How much of it was really extra work that we needed to do because we expanded? But ultimately, because we expanded, because we added all this extra, paving,
almost
you
twofold,
needed to do all this extra concrete. I can understand that there's some amount of overrun, but there's a reason why we got a particular bid from RG that we got over the past year in terms of fixed amount of engineering or fixed costs for unlimited engineering and so on, because they were on the ropes. With respect to us. And so as much as I can understand maybe overages in general on this project, because it is a $2 million project, and because it was significantly expanded, I still don't want to let, personally, I want to let RG off the hook, given the history. And so, I don't want to kind of beat this to death, but I do kind of wonder if you've thought about what we should do in terms of a review with RG to make sure we're comfortable how much of this was a mistake versus just overages that we should have anticipated because we expanded the scope, but maybe just kind of missed it or whatever. So,
Kurt and I have had the conversation about what transpires after December. As you described, we have a fixed fee contract for the current year. We've been throwing a lot of things at because there's a fixed fee. We're not going to pay any more. You're going to be seeing one of those shortly when we deal with the Sagamore drainage recommendations and others. But whether we want to continue. This was the first on my watch. I'm aware of what you went through on Coal Creek. I'm aware of what you went through on 88. I could point to another half dozen that we have done in the last couple of years where we haven't experienced. This was my first experience with it, and I wasn't happy with it either. Kurt understands that. Rick and all of the employees at RG understand it, but I don't like bringing you a 50% miss either. There's some, there's not justification. There's some explanation for it. Some of it was the speed with which the project grew by twofold. A $600,000 paving project grew to $1.8 million as a result of some great prices. But we missed, some things got missed on the second phases. I could go back and try to do measurements, or have staff go back and try to do measurements and say, okay, of the miss, how much of it came south of Colton? Anecdotally, the vast majority. The vast majority of it is in concrete, curb and sidewalk. That's where the miss came.
Trustee D'Souza.
Well, I just want to say that I agree in the sense, we are paying for their advice, and if their advice is off, obviously this isn't the first time as far as this board has found that. But, in general, they do a lot of things. I'd say there are times that they've done things very well. So, but it was, in here it said it was expedited. So when you asked them, when we expanded the scope and said we'd like them to go out there and give us some sort of an idea, did they say at that time that, look, we probably don't have enough time to really give you a very good qualification here?
No, absolutely not. We didn't hear about it until it was actually going in, and we were getting, costs coming in. Costs coming in about how much concrete was coming out, and obviously, therefore, going to be need to be replaced.
Or sink the road.
Yeah, I know. I know that we went over this before with contingencies with them and saying, that I think it was 20% contingency before, something that we had.
It was 15.
Something before, and that we needed to take that down and down to 10%.
And the contingency on this one was 7%, 140 out of a $2 million.
But
now,
I'm
granted,
just wondering,
of the 140,
right?
The vast majority of it is getting consumed by this smaller subset. Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering if there's something in the future then that we can do to say that, look, if they're short by this, that they do have some burden to bear with this. So I would agree with Trustee Skumatz on that.
Trustee Skumatz.
And here's just one final short thing, and that is that I'd like us to actually be able to pull together a matrix of the things that RG did and what, their estimate and what it actually came out like. And I think the last time we asked for this, maybe it was under the previous somebody or something, and it was like, oh, we don't have the stuff back anytime or whatever, but I assume we have better records this time, and I'd like to see us have a time series of how they did, and maybe 90% of them are right on target, but let's know that when we go into this discussion.
Trustee Rosenfeld.
Yeah, I'll just close with a quick comment. I have no doubt that had we received a contract, several months ago to do this work, and it came in at $350,000, I personally would have supported it simply because we were getting such a good bang for the buck. The amount of work that we were getting for the town was the cost was tremendous value for us, and so ultimately the town really made out this year, and I don't want people to lose sight of that. The thing that worries me is, again, just accountability with this particular contractor moving forward. And so it would be good to just have a sense for, everybody has kind of a batting average, how, when you miss, when you hit them out of the park, and, when you hit a double. And it would be nice to understand where we are with RG and what we might want to do next year. And so really a lot of it for me just comes down to not this particular issue, but just kind of the level of trust that you have in your contractors and the level of accountability that you can give to them, or responsibility in helping you manage town work. So for me, that's where this comes into. But on this particular issue, I just look back. If it was a $350,000 contract and it was because we did 2X and this, that, the other, I would have been fine with it.
It's the
But
shock
just-
value of the
it's the shock
46,
and it's the
46%
after-
overrun.
Right, exactly. So I just want to make sure that, from my perspective, I think if we agree that this is, we're going to look at this from a contractor perspective, and whether or not, how many good things they've done, where have they missed, what do we think that means for future projects, and make a determination based on that in terms of whether we need a contract. That's what I feel comfortable with moving forward.
And when we talk contractor, we're talking engineering vendor.
Engineering, yes.
And that's the issue I raised.
I understand
And
completely,
not
but I
that-
didn't want anybody to this is nothing about
Yes.
Brown Brothers.
I'm
I
talking
have-
about engineering services, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Right, so you made my point was that it was a good discussion about RG and our engineering consultant, but really this contract is with Brown Brothers Concrete, our construction company that did high-quality work, and we're happy with that, and we don't think they did anything that wasn't appropriate, so. With that, Trustee Shirley?
I don't know whether you wanted to open it up for anybody's
Oh,
comments.
yes, I'm sorry, yes, public comment.
Gladys Horsey. I just want to remind you that RG Consultants was the one that designed the street project in the south end of Original Superior. And Boulder County DA and I will be meeting probably next week to discuss the closed alley. Now, that's another one of RG's not so brilliant projects.
Okay. Additional public comment? Trustee Cirilli?
Yeah. I move that we approve the change order on the townwide concrete repair contract as proposed in item 6F. A change order not to exceed $555 to the original Brown Brothers Contracting Inc. contract. Let me repeat the number. $112,555 is the not to exceed amount
Great.
of the change order.
Thank you very much. Motion by Trustee Cirilli, second by Trustee Skumatz. Additional discussion. Phyllis? Yes.
Rosenfeld,
Yes.
Skumatz,
Yes.
Israeli,
Yes.
D'Souza.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That motion carries. So we're up to item number 8, adoption of a resolution approving a real estate purchase contract for the Madsen property. Mr. Randall?
Brief history. The history on this property goes long beyond my tenure with the town, but going back to the fall of 2007 and upon the election of the newest board members, I believe it was February of 2009, the board had established and then reaffirmed its land acquisition strategy for the use of open space funds. The town board had identified a number of parcels that it was interested in acquiring, and the parcel that is before you this evening is one of those parcels. It has always been one of the high-priority acquisitions for the board. Specifically, it's a 1.4-acre property. It's owned by Mr. and Mrs. Madsen. It's currently in unincorporated Boulder County. It's located west of, not immediately adjacent to the road, but west of 3rd Avenue. In Original Town, it's adjacent to the Arsenault property, which we bought back in early 2007. It is adjacent to the property that is currently under contract between the town and Mr. Oxner, pretty much an island. Some of the board's discussions with the property owner in the past have been over a desire to annex and develop residential development on this particular property. We've held firm saying, no, you can't get access to the street, no, we're going to fight multiple annex or development either under Boulder County or under Town of Superior rules. And as a result of that very steadfast position, the property owner finally came to terms and said, I will agree to sell to you under what the town's offer was. Specifically, the offer is for the 1.4-acre parcel, $106,250. That equates to $75,893 per acre. I put that in comparison because of the other open space purchases that the town has consummated within that particular area. It's a little bit cheaper on a per acre price than what the town has previously paid. taking advantage of some real estate market conditions that have, as a result of the last couple of years' drop in the economy. It does call for a $1,000 earnest deposit, and because it's a cash deal, we expect to close within 30 days. Be glad to answer any questions you might have about it.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Comments from the board? Questions or comments, public?
Gladys Forshey, 404 South Third Avenue. I have several issues here. On the open space summary, it says, let's see, let me get my piece of paper out here. The open space summary, at the bottom on the first page, it says, this parcel is historically significant due to its proximity to the historic well house dating from the 1800s. Then on page 8 of the real estate contract, it says there is no well. Well, excuse me, if you have a well house, at one time you had to have a well. That just means that the well has filled in. It is still in existence. It can be cleaned out and used if you get the proper papers to do that. So that is totally an error. And Mr. Town Manager, you're exactly right. You have no idea about the conflict about this piece of property. Mr. Mayor, I think you're the only one on this board now that was present at the time that we went through this ugly ordeal and lost historic buildings on this property. And I do not think that this piece of property should be purchased by the town of Superior. Our mayor at the time that we went through this ugly ordeal before said that it is not the town's responsibility to benefit the property owner, whether it's a street or whether it's anything else on that property. I was harassed by this property owner after he bought that piece of property, and there is a story that goes with that property between the seller and the now owner, which is not pleasant and is not the way that an 86-year-old woman should have been treated at that time. And I just do not think that this should be annexed at all. I request that Deb and Dana abstain from voting on this because of the fact that you're on the OSAC, on OSAC. Those of you that weren't on the board and involved in all this ugly process before do not know that there is a old, large septic system on this property that does drainage. There was a horse corral, large horse corrals on this property for years. Any water that drains off that property does not meet health department regulations. John Kuffner's could not use their well when those horses was on that property and because of that old septic system. So this is an absolute health hazard. This property should not be developed in any way whatsoever. Open space, it should not be considered in any way whatsoever. I am livid, absolutely livid, that public funds are considered being used to purchase such a health hazard, let alone the fact this is outside of the town of Superior property line, the boundaries of the town of Superior. And I talked to Boulder County today, and they don't think that those funds should be used for purchasing this property outside of the town boundaries. What you also don't know is that there was a mobile home on that property. The property owner now has made that into a single-story ranch-style and has got the classification changed on the Boulder County Assessor's records. There's problems with this property owner on multiple levels. I don't see anywhere in the real estate contract that Rocky Mountain Fuel has been contacted. Rocky Mountain Fuel owns mineral rights under all of that property. I don't see that they have been contacted in any way. I'm going to flat outright tell you that if you vote on this and approve this open space, I am filing a complaint with Boulder County District Attorney, Boulder County Health Department, State of Colorado Health Department, and the State of Colorado Water Resources Division.
Thank you. Any additional public comment about this particular issue?
Suzanne Sawyer, Ratliff, 405 South 3rd Avenue. Gee, I'm glad to hear some of the history because I was going to do some of the history. And I guess you get the idea there's a long and painful history with this property. But prior to the painful history, there was a great woman, an interesting, fascinating woman named Edna Ambrose, who was born and raised in Superior. She told great stories, and I think we have her in our oral history. We still have our oral histories around. So I think the story about Edna, the neighbors like to tell, when she came around to all of us, so excited, because finally after refusing to sell to some potential buyers, she had found a buyer for her property. And she was so excited because she said, you know, I would never have sold to anyone who would develop this. I would only sell to someone who would appreciate what this homestead is about and what this land is about. And so this 86-year-old woman who died shortly thereafter when she moved to Rifle after selling her property couldn't wait to tell us that the purchaser of this property was so excited to bring his family, and particularly his 9-year-old son, to live in original town Superior, because that's what they wanted, was a small town environment for their child. Suffice it to say, the family never came to live in Superior. Edna moved away and subsequently died. And what we had then found out with some concern that the person who had bought the property was a real estate person who has come before this board to say, but I always intended to develop the property. Well, I guess that story speaks for itself then, doesn't it? If that was always his intention, and if the 86-year-old woman excitedly went around telling all the neighbors about the wonderful family with the 9-year-old child who was going to come. So there is a lot of pain in what occurred here for all of us. So I have an ethical dilemma tonight appearing before you. I brought out of one of my cabinets the drawer that holds over many years all of the stuff that we've had to bring before the board related to this parcel. And in it, I thought I might as well put it up today because it's very important sometimes, I think, to let people know. Does that say NIMBY or something like that? That's what say, yes, in my backyard, NIMBY. So I live next door to this property. Here's the ethical dilemma for me. I have stood before you and said, the back portion of this property is unincorporated Boulder County and is therefore de facto open space. The person who owns this property had come before this board and said, fine, if you don't want to annex my property, I'll develop it through Boulder County. But I had already spoken with Boulder County and found out, as we all know, that they would not allow development of this property. So I guess what I want to say to you is I love the idea that this will be open space. I would love to see this expanded. My ethical dilemma is I have stood before you previously and said, this property is indeed de facto open space. If we do not annex this property into our town, it stays in unincorporated Boulder County, and it doesn't get developed. When I heard that we were going to spend money for this property, my dilemma is, do I just sit home and rejoice because this will be confirmed open space that has been purchased? Or do I have the obligation to come to you and say, have you looked at all of the alternatives for this property? Have you looked at all the possibilities? The property abuts Boulder County Open Space. Does Boulder County Open Space want to partner with Superior in purchasing and extending their parcel of property? I can't believe I'm standing here saying this if you want to know the truth. Because my greatest concern is, what is coming next? There is no trust of a person who says one thing to an 86-year-old woman and proceeds differently and then speaks to this board differently. So my question and my concern is, what's going on? What's next? Once this property is gone, delightfully to open space, if that's what's going to happen, what's going to happen here? What is the plan? I'm always looking for the next plan. You can see over time it's always important to look for the next plan. So I guess I just want to say, as a fellow citizen, to you all who are on the town council, have you played chess with this? Have you looked what the expectations are? What are the expectations here? Is there some sort of new plan to overexpand? So what I say to you is, as a citizen of Superior, are we spending money to make something open space that's already de facto open space? I sit home and I say, I got to get up at 5 in the morning and drive to Wyoming tomorrow. I think, like you sometimes, probably don't want to be here, but I felt like I had to be here. I see a lot going on in this town where people are deciding their NIMBY issues and they're deciding their ethics based on their greed. And maybe that's one way to go, but I can't live with myself unless I raise to you the idea that I think there are other aspects of this that perhaps have not been explored. And if I've missed the explorations that have already occurred, then I just came up here to appear before you very ethically and say, even though I would love to live next door to this open space, I wonder if it was already going to be open space, even without, $100,000+. So that's the question that I think is major here. I do have a question of how a trailer can subtly be called now a ranch-style home because a sidewalk was put around it. Looks like a trailer mobile home to me. Nothing changed at all over there. Those are the things that I'm asking our town manager and our town council to pay attention to. What's going on when somebody's coming in and able to do that? What's going on when the way properties have been and how they've been parceled out, that an absentee landlord can come in and keep his property, just a fire hazard, not taking care of it, just leaving. He doesn't live here. He doesn't have to see it every day. We used to see Edna's garden there, and now we see his mess that he doesn't take care of. Those are the things I ask you to protect us from. I ask you to look at South 3rd Avenue, the number of houses, and if in playing the game of chess, this owner is planning to build a whole lot more homes, sticking them in to this frontage area, then that's what I want you to pay attention to. But on the piece that has to do with this agenda item, I don't know if we had an extra 100,000 plus to throw around, but I'm missing something here, and I would encourage you to I have a lot of respect for people who serve on committees and boards in the town. I know how much work it takes, and I admire all of you for being here and doing what you do. The Open Space Committee must have gone over all of this. The town staff, attorney, must have gone over all of this. So I feel a little presumptuous to step up here and say, maybe I know something you all didn't already investigate. But I would love and thank you in advance for an explanation of why this amount of money is worth spending on unincorporated Boulder County land that Boulder County will not allow to be developed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Additional public comments? The YIMBY. Board questions or comments? Trustee Skometz?
Thanks for all the great issues to talk to just one tiny thing. That is that I think that while current policy or this board may not want to see a particular property developed, that doesn't bind future boards for that. The only thing that binds future boards is buying it as open space. So that's sort of the only thing that makes it so that couldn't be developed in the future. So, small point.
Trustee D'Souza?
Yeah, I just wanted to double check that with our town manager. There's, or maybe our attorney, I'm not sure. There's nothing on that property from Boulder County that would say they would never be able to develop it. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, so it's possible if it's a different...
It's a legally platted lot.
Right.
And
So
the reason that the property owner has perpetually been approaching the town, twofold. One, access. Unless you're a helicopter pilot, you can't get to it
Right.
without coming off of one of our streets. And the town has historically said, no, you're not going to get access. And two, utilities.
And so while we have a very open space conscientious group of county commissioners right now, that may not always be the case. And so there's no guarantee that that section would remain open space. Is the problem that I have. I had another question that Gladys brought up about, it says the parcel is historically significant due to its proximity to the historic well. It was never promised that the historic well was on the property, was it?
I recited for you your OSAC report dated 2005.
So this just says proximity. Am I reading that wrong? It says
No,
nearby,
you're
not
reading,
on.
you're reading it right.
Okay.
I can't vouch for the validity of what OSAC wrote in 2005.
Okay.
That was included in OSAC's original analysis
And
that they did
the-
of 21 or 24 parcels back in 2005.
And then, are you aware of any current contamination or hazardous conditions out there on that property?
Thank you for clarifying, not on that property.
Okay. Because that would be important. So, and then to address OSAC and this, this wasn't one of the, I wouldn't say high priorities. This was a property that OSAC had looked at. One of the reasons that they didn't put that up there, and this is something in the discussions, we had a lot of discussion over, not because it wasn't a nice piece of property per se, but because we were looking at larger contiguous pieces of property. And this is a very tiny piece of property. So it's not something that OSAC ever said, this is something we don't ever want to consider purchasing. And then I did have a question about the funds. There are OSAC funds that will run out.
No, OSAC has no money. The town has
I'm sorry,
open space
OSAC,
money.
sorry.
That is a misnomer.
I'm sorry, we do talk like that in OSAC, like it's our money, but the town's
This
open
happened.
space, sorry, the town's open space funds.
Right.
There are some funds that run out.
No.
Is this something that we could use towards that?
We've already crossed that threshold.
Okay.
The fact that the town issued $6 million in bonds for open space purchases after the original tax was improved, and there was a period of time we were concerned about arbitrage. We've passed the deadline for the arbitrage, and we've got legal opinion saying we're clear of it because it was our intent. We had a plan in which to spend the money within the 3-year time frame. The town's current open space fund balance is in the high 4 millions. Not quite 5, I think it's 4.7 to 4.9 currently, of which this money would be coming from. Again, we continue to generate revenues. We have the $6 million bond proceeds which have been spent. I would clarify, a lot of the money that's already been spent was on property that was not, at the time it was purchased, incorporated within town. After its purchase, it was annexed into the town, most recently the Arsenal property. So being within the town's borders or outside the borders hasn't been a critical issue for the town in the past.
And so I'm trying to think of how I can ask this question, but purchasing this $100,000 would not in any way hold up or cause a problem or not allow the town to purchase, say, another large piece of property at this point in time? I don't know if there's a way that you can easily answer that or not.
Again, you've got a fund balance approaching $5 million. We have debt service currently. The fund balance grows to the tune of $300,000 to $400,000 a year after we pay our debt service. You're in pretty fine stead, but no, I mean, it doesn't mean that you could, that if something else came along with a, do my quick math, an 8-digit price tag, you don't have the wherewithal to do it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's, a difficult question. And as far as the neighborhood issues, that I understand how difficult those can be when these are people that you know. And I don't know how to say this really. I guess from a board position, I don't feel that is necessarily my battle as far as what neighbors said to each other and that type of thing. What I can look at is what can we do for the town in the future. And so that would be where I guess I would have to look at this property. Would it solve some of those long-term issues? This is going to be open space. It's also a buffer space. So there's I guess for me those would be more of the issues, although I appreciate hearing the history of it. And one other, I know I'm taking a long time, but one other thing as far as being on OSAC, I know that we've gone over this with our town attorney before, that there is no problem with me voting or any member. But I also want to say that both elections, I ran on an open space platform. So this is what I said I would be looking into doing, would be purchasing open space. So I think it's important that I vote. So that's
Thanks. Jesse Rosenfeld?
Yeah, I have a comment, but first, just one other question. There was a comment about mineral rights.
Mm-hmm.
How does that feed into this?
We're not purchasing mineral rights, and nor is there any notification requirements for real estate purchases. I believe the speaker was confusing the issue with development, which requires the underlying owner of mineral rights to consent to a development or a subdivision on top of the property. Nothing to do with the transfer of ownership of the surface rights.
Okay. I have one thing that I recall about this property when the opportunity came up a couple months ago to pursue an open space purchase. I actually saw this property listed on Craigslist for sale.
You did.
I did. Yeah.
You did.
And I forwarded it around to some folks and said, I just found it amusing because it was being sold as a property that should be developed, and all you have to do is take it to the town, and it even had the property broken up into different lots and where the road would go with access through South Third and so on. And I'm also aware, not intimately, but I've heard stories about the history of how the owner came to own this property. And I understand that there's some history, some kind of hurt feelings, some anger. Some people feel maybe this person didn't behave very well in terms of how he acquired this property. Ultimately, I look at this from the standpoint of what's the best thing moving forward. What's the best thing for the town in terms of acquiring open space, in terms of preserving land that could potentially be developed in the future, that you could put a house on right now or whatever. And from my perspective, I think it's better, given where we know this owner continually has tried to take this land year after year after year, and to Trustee Skumatz's point, it's better to take it off the table, period, and be done with it for what is a fairly small amount of money relative, less than 2% in comparison to what our total fund balance is. I see it as kind of a quick win, just a small purchase, but one that's valuable given where the creek is and so on. And so, the history is not great, but moving forward, I think it's better to take it off the table and not have to worry about this issue continually coming up again and again and again, and just kind of be done with it. So from my standpoint, I think it's a good purchase. I think it's one that just will hopefully help bury the history and let us move on as a town. Let residents who live around there move on, and brings us a small but valuable piece of property given where it is against the creek, and kind of complementary to the idea of trying to preserve stuff further west on the creek as well. So that's my perspective.
Trustee Skumatz?
So I guess I wonder if we can get the town, so on the mineral rights question, does that mean any of our open spaces could just be dug up by the mineral rights owners underneath?
There's an access issue. You don't own the mineral rights under your home, but they can't come into your backyard and dig a well.
So what can they do?
They can access the mineral rights from various locations.
So if they own some property, they'd have to go under, I see.
Yes.
So
But
if we own
again,
the open space.
mineral rights entitle the owner of the mineral rights to consent to subdivisions and developments above it. It has nothing to do with the transfer of the.
And that's not what I was asking, though. I was asking if they had the right to just
In most of
open pit mine our
in most of
open
in most of
space.
Superior, there are mineral rights that are owned by people that don't own the surface rights.
Right,
And they do have rights to pull minerals out of the ground.
and by direct access, or do they have to come in?
It depends. Again, sounding like a lawyer. It depends on where the minerals are and in the best way that they can get to them. But yes, they have an absolute right to access those minerals if they're already under there.
Even from potentially scrape and pull it out?
No, they don't have the right to open pit mine.
Thanks.
Don't have the right to the surface.
Interesting. Didn't know that. So any trails we build or whatever, these guys could, all right. So the Gladys Forsey raised a bunch of issues related to health and other things. Have we got any review on that, or do we?
No.
Is that something where we might be pulling some liability into our midst? I think it's a fair question
Like
to
if
ask.
something happens, if we find afterwards?
Yeah.
Is that?
Plutonium triggers were once manufactured on the site. I mean, I'm not aware of anything on the site previously or currently.
That causes a hazard
No.
of any kind.
Yeah, I know Smith
And,
did
but,
that
and,
report.
and there's a question, though, of not being aware because you haven't looked at it, or not being aware because you have looked at it.
Those
It
that the
doesn't
town
exist.
have engaged in the past, 2005, 2007, none of that came to light.
And that we did appraisals or something that gave us some review of the property?
Your open space reports, yes,
Yeah,
but that's it.
the open space is a committee that's just a bunch of citizens that, it's not like some expert reviewed the property and said, oh my gosh, here's a little thing that says, something.
But we had
I'm
a
not trying to raise a big
No,
issue,
no,
I'm just trying to say, I think this is,
Can I just respond to that?
I want someone to.
Trustee Souza?
Sorry, only that I agree, the Open Space Committee, we wouldn't have tested for
Yeah.
anything like that.
You
We did
would
have a
expect it to.
Smith report, they did, obviously they were in a better situation than that, but I don't know, again, exactly what they tested for, or in that range, so.
Trustee Rosenfeld?
Well, if I'm open, I think normally when you buy properties, and especially based on the fact that there has been review, people have walked the property and they've recommended it, for acquisition or whatever, that, I didn't, personally don't see that, boy, we should have gone through this whole rigorous, let's, make sure there's no, toxic material or whatever on the property. If there's allegations that there is something and we can look into it further before closing on this, say at the next meeting or something, I'm open to that. But I want to make sure it's, it's legitimate and not just a tactic to try and delay or stall. But, so I don't know how you determine that at this point. I mean, it certainly would have been nice if that was, brought up earlier.
Isn't this the first time it's been on the agenda?
George, it's slightly out of order, but if you have something that's pertinent to this issue, I'll entertain a comment.
I do, or I wouldn't be up here, Mayor. George Kupner. I want to ask you a question. What access do you have to this property? You don't have any. This property is, you're not getting the duplex, you're not getting, or whatever you want to call it, the trailer house. You're not getting the house, and you're not getting the lot next to it. The alley behind it has been abandoned. There's no access to this property whatsoever, except for him to come back and say, I'll sell you an access to the property. How are you going to maintain this property? It'd be up to town to cut the weeds. Tell me, the south is Boulder County's open space, which you know what their regulations are. You're not to be traveling on their open space, and the trail goes right next to it. So what access you got to it? You're buying a piece of property you have no access to.
Okay, thank you.
And
So,
the creek is on the west side of it, so tell me.
well, I think I have the answer to this, but Mr. Randall, if you have anything. So, I mean, basically, they own the property that accesses onto 3rd Street, and we haven't annexed them into town, but we'll be buying them and then annexing it into town, so we'll have access. There will be access off of 3rd Street.
No, they won't. No, there's no access on 3rd
But-
Street, sir.
Okay?
As
will
I
have to-
indicated before, the adjacencies are Boulder County open space, Town of Superior open space, and anticipated Town of Superior open space, assuming that our acquisition of the Oxnard property is completed.
Okay. Additional comments?
So, I
Yeah.
don't think I got an answer to the Third Street part, though.
So,
There's no access.
Okay.
I'd
There's
have-
access to Town Superior open space, you're saying?
Anticipated access.
No, current and
Yeah.
anticipated.
Where's the
Three different
current?
public entity, three different public accesses. Arsenault, Boulder County, and if we consummate the other acquisition, we'd also have it from the west.
So, I guess I guess the answer to the questions that I raised, which were,
We have not conducted an environmental assessment.
nobody sort of with qualifications of any kind, sort of, not that Open Space Committee.
No, I mean, we don't do that.
Hasn't,
type of-
nobody's walked it or inspected it. And it hasn't been sort of appraised by somebody who's walked it who might be able to see those sorts of things.
I wouldn't engage an appraiser to give me an environmental assessment.
Well, but I mean, even to that level. Not even, okay. So is it something that can be done?
We do have the
Review
opportunity under the
quickly?
contract to inspect the property. So yes, it could be done under that inspection period.
And when is that inspection period, or what does its timing work out to, and so on and so forth?
Let me look back at the dates.
30 days before close. Or 30 days to close.
So
It's
I guess I just have to
October
make a few comments here. So walking this property several times, it's unfortunate that they've torn down some historical buildings. It was unfortunate. So I think somehow there's an impression that the town's going to be building something on this. I don't quite follow that logic. I mean, we're buying it for open space. We don't want to do anything with that except for keeping it as open space. And walking on, what are the buildings that have been on there? There's been a stable. There's, I believe, been a housing unit for minors, I believe. I don't remember the exact details with it, but nonetheless, we don't want to do anything with this property. It's been a headache for years. There's nothing on there that's ever been done in an industrial way, so what kind of contamination would we have on the property? And I think we should just put this to bed and be done with it at a price level that's very reasonable. So, once again, I guess that's my I didn't believe that this would ever be controversial, buying open space, but somehow it is. So that's my thought.
And I'm not so worried about what's on the property, because I don't expect us to do anything, but if it causes issues off the property and we own that liability, that's my concern.
Okay.
I guess I want to understand this right and wrong piece of property thing that we're hearing about. Should
we have a map or something?
Well, so-
we can put it to the property?
What I'd recommend, because we're just going to get it back and forth. This will just need to come back at the next meeting with property lot lines that everybody can see, because I don't want to get in a back and forth right now.
Okay, that's a good idea.
So
It's their time with that.
Can we do that within the current?
we haven't signed anything yet. So
But would we have, I'm assuming, would you move the purchase date out to mid-October?
Probably.
Or mid-November?
And would we do any walk?
we have the right to inspect the property. So
We do
Okay.
that. We do that.
all right. Well, let's table this and move it to the next regularly scheduled board meeting. Thank you. With that, let's move on to item number 9, which is a resolution approving a real estate option agreement with the Menkick property. I'm getting worried now, but
As I indicated in the staff report, the board has had a long-standing goal on the wall that one of its highest economic development priorities has been the retention and expansion of the Boulder Valley Ice Facility. As you probably know, that the facility that was built earlier this decade was always designed, intended to be a temporary facility. One of the reasons why it continually had a perpetual 2-year rotating land lease on which the property was built. The town has explored, discussed both with the Boulder Valley Ice Foundation, the board, and has explored every available property in and immediately adjacent to the town of Superior as a possible location on which to place it. The action item before you is an option agreement, which the board has discussed many, many times, which gives the town the right over the course of the next 90 days to buy 10 acres from Mr. and Mrs. Menkick. You'll recall that the Menkick, the Ella Menkick, is the north 80 acres of the 160 acres across the street, frequently referred to as the town center. Actually, Mr. and Mrs. Menkick own the northernmost 18 acres on which the existing rink sits and on which this 10 acres would be. The option would call for, within 90 days, if the town chooses to exercise the option, to purchase it for $100,000 an acre, $1 million. And within that period of time, we would be surveying and coming up with the exact 10 acres, the exact dimension that would be needed in order to accommodate Boulder Valley Ice's new facility. And simultaneous with that, the town would be completing a development agreement with Boulder Valley Ice, outlining the terms under which they would be building their new facility. We wanted to bring this forward in the option agreement rather than just when we were ready to pull the trigger on the purchase, in an effort to try to be as transparent as we possibly could by disclosing it as early as we could of the town's intention to buy land on behalf of Boulder Valley Ice, but at the same time without compromising the negotiations that were going on. And as the board knows, with the Menkicks, this has been going on for well over, I know it predates me, years, but the staff report also indicates all of the things. Obviously, the retention of Boulder Valley Ice, the expansion and the significant traffic generation that particular not-for-profit facility generates to the town. The idea of jump-starting for the first time activity, private sector activity within the town center. Win-win-win. But the downside, or the con, if you will, it's an aggressive tact on the part of the town to be facilitating this kind of an economic development project by infusing $1 million in land.
okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Questions or comments from the public?
Gladys Forshee, I just have 2 or 3 questions to get clarified. You said that the new building will take up part of the area where the present building is?
No.
Did I know?
We don't know that.
Okay. You don't know yet, okay.
Said the Mr. and Mrs. Menkick own 18 acres on which the current building sits and on which this 10 acres the new building will sit. Nothing about merging of the two facilities.
What will happen to the present building?
It's owned by Boulder Valley Ice. And as I understand the longstanding agreements between the town and Boulder Valley Ice, when that was originally built, the town has a right of first refusal to buy the structure if the town were to so choose. But there's been no discussions regarding how the existing structure might get used.
In the handout, it has that there will be economic generator, and I wanted to have a definition on what that would be.
So, I guess I can speak to that. So the economic generation is that the facility is not anticipated to raise a whole bunch of revenues, and there might be people here tonight that could speak to this, but that we know that our retailers that are next to the current facility reap significant benefits from secondary traffic that participates or goes to their retail establishments. So that's the economic generation. And I don't know if Mr. Randall had anything else to add to that, but that's the town's perspective.
Okay, I guess, I hate to really dwell on something, but if they move out of this present building that they're in now and it just sits there, and the town has the option to buy it, I mean, here's going to be an empty building. Do you think it'll be torn down? Do you think it'll be built? I mean, there has to be something that has been thrown around or discussed to some degree. I guess what I'm concerned about is the loss of property taxes. If that building is owned by a nonprofit, they're not paying taxes like, other businesses do, and then we're buying land and building a new one, so then we're losing that property tax money. So I just would sort of like to have that addressed.
Once again, others can probably speak to this, but they only have a temporary agreement there, so I assume it would be the property owner that would then require the building to be moved, torn down. So it won't be staying there.
George Cup, 109 Southport. I've watched this process for years and years. People, longer than you've been here. What have we approached Louisville on the sales tax split 50% by us buying this property? And what will we owe? We owe, got agreement with Louisville, 50% sales tax on this 80 acres over here when we annexed it in 1998. Was approached to the town years before that and was rejected. Then it come back into the town, and the agreement is with the town of Louisville that the town split the revenues 50-50. Has there been any communications with the city of Louisville pertaining to this 10-acre purchase, or will we owe them some money for this 10-acre purchase?
We don't know. The agreement, and it's a 1995 agreement between the town of Superior and the city of Louisville, not Louisville, but Louisville. And it calls for 50-50 sharing of sales tax on the north 80 acres. Nothing else. Sales tax that gets generated on the north 80 acres will be split 50-50 between the two cities.
If you got a nonprofit organization, how are you going to have a sales tax on it, sir? And also,
There is
I want
none.
to know, how many?
There is none.
That's right. On 10 acres, there is none. And it is to the south, where it is planned for development for this town and an income for this town, and you were taking this 10 acres right out to the south.
I think it'd be clear cut. It doesn't affect our agreement with Louisville.
None.
Not,
Well, in the annexation agreement, the sales tax is split 50-50. If you take 10 acres out, you're not going to have sales tax on 10 acres. Now, how many children from this town go, I'm not against the ice rink, don't get me wrong. How many people from this town go to this ice rink that we're proposing to buy $1 million worth of property to support a non-profit organization?
A lot of kids.
Well, give me an idea.
So
We'll have a chance.
we'll have everybody has to make a comment.
Okay,
Yeah, so
he can have a chance. But I can't understand where you come from. You're losing sales tax over there. Have you went to the other alternatives? There was a contract with an individual in this town with that skate rink before. Did the town pursue this alternative with a property in town?
Are you talking about the Rogers property?
That's correct? Well,
I think that's been gone over quite a
What?
bit, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, did the town pursue this
The town,
alternative?
Let's address all these
Yeah.
questions at once, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, because I
That's
think
been-
they're all really good questions, and I think but I suspect we'll get lots of comments, and it might be good for individually, different board members and the mayor as a whole to try and answer them at once. So can you just, I think it makes sense to ask
Oh,
questions.
you want
and
me to
then
ask
we'll-
some questions, to tell you no questions, huh?
Huh?
You don't want me to?
No, I want you to ask
No,
all your
just-
questions.
but
We
just
just
not
can't
have
answer
answer
them one-on-one. I think we'll just kind of batch the questions up and answer them at once at the end.
Well, what
So-
revenue will we lose? You tell me that.
Right.
On the sales tax, when we purchased the 10 acres over a period of years. I mean, it was planned for retail, commercial over there, period. And that is in the agreement with the city of Louisville. We had to go back to the city of Louisville to get the 2,000 extension, 2,000 more home, or not homes, but
residents.
residents over in that area.
Yep.
So why wouldn't we have to go back on something like this too? I mean, why did we just purchase a piece of property and say,
So
no
you-
sales tax revenue?
So you're
split?
asking why
Yeah.
the agreement with Louisville is not affected? And I think
Yeah,
we can answer that.
that's a main one, because
We'll answer that.
that was the deal to begin with.
Mhm.
And then probably, I think you ought to put this off for a while and discuss it amongst yourselves to the next meeting, just like you did the other deal, because I picked this thing up Thursday. Friday, everybody works. Saturday and Sunday, there's nobody around. And today's Monday, and the Monday night, we're voting on something that we're going to purchase for $1 million. That's true. The general public hasn't really got grasp of what you're doing. I'm serious.
I think the action item before the board tonight costs $100. It buys a 90-day period in which the board will have the opportunity to pursue the actual real estate purchase, for clarity's sake.
Okay, additional public comment? And just formalities, name and address, if you wouldn't mind.
My name is Brian Volkman. I'm Vice President of the Boulder Valley Hockey Foundation. I've been here before, and I thank the board for its support in the past and its continued support. And really would like to answer any questions that the board might have, or anyone else, about the foundation and what we're about and what we intend. Just to clarify a little bit of the property tax, sales tax, we are a nonprofit foundation, and as such, even though we wrestle the state and Boulder County, seems like continually about it, as a nonprofit, of course, we do not pay property tax. We do pay half of the land tax because the landlord, Mr. Mankick, is a for-profit entity by definition. And so we have an agreement currently with the state and the county that we pay half of the assessed value of the land where it is on, because we don't own it. George owns it, and we rent it. So just to clarify that. As far as sales tax revenue, if I can speak directly to that, as an ice rink, we don't generate a lot of sales, retail sales, so we don't directly generate a lot of sales tax. But indirectly, we do have, I think your memo here has 500,000 visitors. This year will be significantly higher than that on our one-sheet facility because we've added a junior A team, which is very exciting for us. So I don't know if you were there last weekend. We had standing room only for 3 games over the weekend with the El Paso Rhinos, and of course we covered the empty space over there with cars and things. So we bring a lot of destination traffic. So businesses like Old Chicago, Super Joe's, the retail outlets around get the benefit of us bringing 500,000 destination visitors there with an hour or 2 to kill. So that's the perceived economic value. And that's, we've talked to certainly this board before and other people in the neighborhood, and it's generally perceived as an economic benefit. So I don't think I'm stretching there. So I'd be happy to take a shot at any questions you have for us.
Questions from the board? Ms. Gomez?
Just one quick one. is the Boulder Valley Ice facility part of the vision, the town center vision plan? Just for on the record.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
It has always been anticipated that a city block would be consumed by the relocation or the location of a permanent ice facility.
Thanks.
Trustee D'Souza?
And with the new facility, you'll be adding more ice, is that correct?
We're hoping to make it a two-sheet facility.
And can you just go over why would that make a difference for you?
Right now, we turn away children, families in our program because we simply don't have the ice time to facilitate that. Also, with the addition of of the junior team, and we're already stretched. I mean, we start practices. We currently also lease ice from CU, which is kind of an adventure because every time they have a football game, we drop kids off several blocks from the ice rink and they hike over. But I digress. We believe that we have a market for currently at least 1.5 sheets, and believe we could easily grow that to 2 sheets if we were able to accommodate families in a reasonable fashion. Also, we're currently not able to support some ancillary activities like figure skating, curling, things like that are also done on the ice, obviously. But we just don't have the time for it. We can't commit to. As a matter of fact, last year we had to chase off it's not a large program, but it is the speed skating program that has been looking for a home. And these are the people with the long blades that go around real fast. I wouldn't try it, but they seem to have a lot of fun at it. So we do believe that there's a market there. And, we have, this will be our 7th year, our 36th year in business as a hockey foundation association. So we do have a little bit of history in that. I think
And so as far as facilities nearby, you bring in a lot of people because you said there's CU, which is not easily accessible, is that correct?
CU is great, but they have, they have teams
Limited.
of their own, plus
Right.
all of their intramural activities. Plus, of course, they need the recreation time to support their students, their student faculty base. They've been great to work with for the decade and a half I've been involved, but it's a very limited amount of ice. And it's not, it's not terribly convenient for all of the East County folks.
So
Superior, we talk to our constituency, and Superior seems to be a very excellent compromise for our customer base. Someplace in the middle between the East County and Boulder, and seems to be a very popular option.
So you're drawing people from all over the region? Or within this region?
Boulder County, as much of a generality as it is not a bad statement at that point. If you go very far down the 36th corridor, you're at the Westminster Promenade, our arch rivals. And then the Apex Center there on 72nd, and what is that, Teller or whatever that is. Those are the 2 closest facilities. There's the NOCO facility there in Windsor, that was private a year and a half ago.
Out in Windsor, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then about how many, just a rough estimate, because this was brought up before, kids in Superior use your facilities?
I'm going to give you an estimate because I don't have an
Sure.
exact count off
Right.
this year's, registrar list, but I believe that the last time we checked that, I think it was the last time I was here, I think it was 86 of our 360 families. But that's not this year's registration list, but that's the best number I can give you.
So it's quite a bit from outside of Superior that are coming in. Thank you.
Thanks. Additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Additional public comment?
Suzanne Sawyer, Rattler, 405 South 3rd Avenue. I just want to say I think it's great that we have things that involve so many families and so many people, so I want to say that. But I am kind of curious, how is it, I'm assuming that people pay to go to this, so I just wondered, how does it work for you to have nonprofits Had you ever considered turning in this type of thing into a profit situation? And are your books an open record if you're nonprofit?
I think the short answer is yes, yes, no, and yes. But let's see. Let me try that the long way. What the first part was.
I just wondered why you choose nonprofit. Did you ever consider being profit, and how do you qualify and how are your books?
We chose the nonprofit status when we built the rink originally. This could get into a long story, but when we built the rink originally, we chose the nonprofit status obviously so that people could donate and get the tax benefit of donating to a nonprofit foundation to build the rink where we are now. Have we considered becoming a for-profit? Yes, but for the same reason we didn't go originally, so that we can still get the donations to continue our operations and improve the rink and hopefully build the new rink. Will remain a nonprofit. The books as a nonprofit are a matter of public record.
Okay. Thanks.
To the extent.
Additional public comment and/or questions from the board? Well, my comment is that we've been thinking about this for a long time. I think that there's actually, it's a dollars spent up front. I mean, I'm talking about the big dollars now, not the action item tonight, but the big dollars up front that we will reap the reward of in the long term in terms of driving people to our retail sales establishments, and hopefully if we develop a hotel, my hope is that the Hockey Foundation or the rink would be running tournaments where people would come and stay at the hotels. I mean, I think that there's just such a big win-win for this, and it provides a service in the region that is not really available. You can drive down to Westminster, you can drive up to Windsor, I suppose, or you can drive down to Arvada, but there's a huge market for this, so I just, for the $100 that we're going to spend tonight, it seems like that's money well spent, and even in the long term, bigger dollar picture, I think it makes a whole bunch of sense as well. Trustee Rosenfeld.
Yeah, just to address a couple comments and kind of my view on this. So yeah, the agreement with Louisville is not affected, and the agreement covers sales tax sharing and a particular set of requirements as to how much square footage of revenue generating space has to be there, how many residential units, and so on. Using this, because it was already, building something, a two-sheet ice rink was already built into our town center concept vision, doesn't affect the agreement because the agreement doesn't cover, approval for what can be built or property taxes or anything else, and we see that this building can be built and the rest of the agreement can also be fulfilled at the same time. So it doesn't affect the Louisville agreement that we have with them. Right now there is no revenue being generated, so we lose no revenue by buying this property and having a BVI build on it. As people have commented, hopefully we gain a significant amount, both in terms of additional families coming through here and spending money in town, and I think more importantly in the long term, driving development of the town center. We know, many who've been following this for years, that the biggest obstacle right now to development is the property owner. And by doing a little bit more piecemeal development, where we peel off some pieces, we develop it, we create a need, other people hopefully will follow. If we get the traffic and if there's enough families coming in, someone's going to say, I need to build a hotel. There might be room on this property to build maybe peel it off and build a small restaurant that can also contribute back. So there's a significant opportunity here to jumpstart the town center. If we don't do this, I'm very skeptical that anything will happen within the next 5 years at least. And I think this moves up the timetable that we've set to something a little bit more realistic in terms of something happening beyond just this in the next 5 years. So I really see this as a huge opportunity to bring in more families, bring in more money, drive the development of the town center, which so far has been dead on arrival. I also want to comment, we've placed, and we've talked about this in the past, the priority of trying to keep the ice rink in town because of the traffic that it generates. And we've looked at quite a few options. We looked at, of course, proposal to build it on the Rogers Farm, and just the housing density that would have been required to meet the sale price didn't work. We looked at doing it down on the Horizon property, which is on the corner of Colton and McCaslin. That's not the best area. So we looked at doing and that would have required the trade as well, which a lot of people were against. So we're kind of running out of options. And as far as I'm concerned, I am a little hesitant to spend public money for land acquisition of this form, but as I've waited, and of course we talked about this a lot, but as I've waited, I think the benefit to jumpstarting town center development, keeping BVI in town, and actually allowing them to expand their facility far outweighs the concerns I have about using public money in this venture. And I think long term, there's the benefits will pay us back in spades. It is a bit of a gamble. There is a little risk here, but ultimately, I think that if we want the town center to be developed, this is the best first step we can take to get us there. So that's kind of how I see it. Okay.
Yep, please.
Touching on the families and so forth.
Sorry, I have to name and
address.
Business
John
address
Sales,
or, yeah.
1305 South Pitkin Avenue.
Thanks.
I just wanted you to know it's not just about hockey teams and so forth, but it's recreational skating, 1:30 to 3 o'clock on Saturdays and Sundays. There are so many families and kids from ages 3 and up that skate on Saturdays and Sundays at this facility. I'm not sure if you've ever gone by and witnessed the Skate with Santa, but that is a great community deal for where we live, and it's a great draw for our community. Figure skating, we'd love to improve. We'd love to do sled hockey. We'd love for handicapped individuals. There's some great goals and dreams that we have if we do get a 2-rink facility. In the 2-rink facility, too, we'd like to have a community room so we could have a meeting place for the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and things like that. So, again, it's a long ways away, but we're really focused on trying to bring this as a community setting for not just skating and hockey and figure skating, but for a drawing. Maybe it's for bike racers to meet and joggers to meet, but a really neat place for all of the community to get together. So that's our goal, and I just thought I'd make that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Additional board comment? Justice Gurley?
Would like to echo primarily Trustee Rosenfeld's comments. He pretty much hit the nail on the head of where my thoughts were. The greatest concern is the public money for this, but it is a significant piece of the vision for the town center development, and I'm also glad we're perhaps taking this action tonight, because it is out in clear daylight that we're considering supporting Boulder Valley Ice and keeping it in Superior. And we have a 90-day if we take this act, we'll have a 90-day option to buy the land to in fact do that. And I think being out in the open on that for that period of time is a benefit to the whole town too. That in case there are significant other comments, we'll have an ability to hear that. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks. Trustee Skumatz?
Ditto, but I especially liked hearing your most recent comment about the public meeting space, because that was something I raised quite early on as something I hoped that the town would pursue in discussions, and I'm glad to see that was followed through.
If there's no more comments, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve resolution number R-52, Series 2009, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving a real estate option agreement for the purchase of approximately 10 acres of the Medkick property.
Motion by trustee Rosenfeld, second by trustee Skumatz. Further discussion? Phyllis?
Skumatz?
Aye.
Rosenfeld?
Yes.
Muckle?
Yes.
Susie?
Yes.
Surelli?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. That motion carries. So I look forward to further discussion about this issue. Anything else to come before the board tonight?
No further business.
Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.